What would you do if you discovered the person you just fired was the only one who could save what matters most? Clara Voss, the ice-cold CEO of Helios Group, built an empire on ruthless decisions, until the night she stood frozen behind a door, watching a janitor teach her blind daughter the one thing money couldn't buy: hope. But by then, she'd already destroyed him. This is the story of 3 broken souls, 2 pianos, and the song that changed everything. Stay until the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this story reaches across the world. The fluorescent lights of the Helios Group headquarters hummed with the kind of sterile persistence that made Ethan Cole's temples ache. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the executive floor gleamed like polished bone under his mop, cold, white, immaculate. He'd been pushing the same industrial cleaning cart through these marble halls for 8 months now, long enough to know the building's rhythms, the elevator's arthritic groan at midnight, the way the heating system clicked on at 11:15, the particular echo his footsteps made when he was the only living soul on the 20th floor. Or so he thought. Ethan paused mid-stroke, his calloused hands tightening on the mop handle. There it was again, a sound so faint he might have imagined it. A piano note, hesitant, exploratory, like a question mark hanging in the air. Then another, and another. He shouldn't care. His job description was simple: clean, leave, collect the paycheck that kept his 8-year-old daughter Maya fed and their apartment heated. Nothing more. The last thing a man like him needed was complications. He'd learned that lesson 3 years ago when the drunk driver crossed the median on Highway 42 and turned his world into before and after. But something about those notes pulled at him, a melody searching for itself in the dark. Ethan abandoned his mop and cart, following the sound down the corridor past the executive conference room where decisions worth millions were made, past Clara Voss's corner office with its commanding view of the city that never slept. The music grew clearer, drawing him toward the Steinway room, what the building directory formally called Conference Space 20C, but what everyone knew was Clara Voss's private sanctuary, where a concert grand piano sat like a museum piece, more decoration than instrument. The door was ajar. Just barely, just enough. Just through the gap, Ethan saw her, a small figure perched on the piano bench, her legs dangling inches from the floor. She couldn't have been more than 9 years old, wearing a navy dress that probably cost more than his monthly salary. Her dark hair was pulled back with a velvet ribbon, and her fingers, small, uncertain, searched across the keys with the careful precision of someone navigating by touch alone. She was blind. He realized it immediately, not from any obvious sign, but from the way her head tilted toward the sound she created, the way her whole body listened. The girl played another note. Wrong. She grimaced, her small face scrunching in concentration. She tried again, still wrong. A soft sound of frustration escaped her lips. Ethan knew he should walk away. This was Clara Voss's daughter. It had to be. The CEO's personal life was legend and mystery in equal measure. Divorced, distant, raised by nannies while her mother built an empire. The last thing Ethan needed was to be caught lurking outside while the boss's daughter practiced piano in the middle of the night. But the girl played another note, and something in Ethan's chest cracked open like an old door giving way. He'd been 4 years old when his mother first lifted him onto a piano bench, 20 years old when he'd enlisted in the Marines and somehow, impossibly, ended up playing piano in the Fleet Forces band, 28 when Sarah had sat beside him at their apartment's second-hand upright, her hands covering his, teaching him the melody to their song. 31 when the accident took her, took the music, took everything except Maya and the hollow space where his heart used to sing. 3 years. 3 years since he'd touched a piano. The girl played again, same note, same mistake. Ethan pushed the door open slowly, carefully, like approaching a wild bird. "Excuse me," he said softly. The girl's head snapped toward his voice, her body going rigid. Her eyes, a startling gray-green, pointed in his direction but focused on nothing, everything, something beyond sight. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quickly, holding up his hands even though she couldn't see the gesture. "I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Ethan. I work here. I clean the building at night." He paused, suddenly aware of his uniform. The gray jumpsuit with maintenance stitched across the pocket, the smell of pine cleaner that clung to his clothes. I heard you playing and I just... Are you okay? The girl's face cycled through expressions: fear, suspicion, curiosity. Her fingers remained on the keys, protective, possessive. You're not supposed to be here, she said. Her voice was clearer than he expected, with the kind of confidence that came from growing up in boardrooms. You're absolutely right, Ethan admitted. Neither are you, I'm guessing. It's almost midnight. I couldn't sleep. The admission came reluctantly. Mother said I could come here when I can't sleep. She said the music room is mine too. Mother. Not mom or mommy. The formality of it made Ethan's heart ache. That's generous of her, he said carefully. Is she here with you? She's working. She's always working. The girl said it without judgment, just fact. Mrs. Chen is supposed to watch me, but she fell asleep in Mother's office. I know the way here by myself. I counted the steps. Ethan glanced at the hallway behind him. Somewhere in this building, a nanny was probably panicking, but the girl didn't seem distressed, just determined. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated. Then, Sophie. Sophie. That's a beautiful name. Ethan took another step into the room, moving slowly so his footsteps would announce his approach. That's a beautiful piano too. Steinway Model D. 9 feet of solid excellence. You play? I'm learning. Another pause. I'm not very good. I heard you just now. You've got good touch, light but confident. You're just struggling with intervals, right? The distance between notes? Sophie's face brightened with surprise. You play piano? The question hit Ethan like a physical blow. Did he play? Once upon a time, music had been his language, his oxygen, his reason. Now it was a ghost that haunted him in grocery stores and elevators, every melody a reminder of what he'd lost. I used to, he said quietly. A long time ago. But not anymore? Not anymore. Sophie tilted her head, processing this. Why not? Because every note reminds me of Sarah. Because music was ours and now she's gone and playing feels like betrayal. Because I tried once, 6 months after the funeral, and the sound that came out was so broken I scared Maya half to death. It's complicated, Ethan said. That's what adults say when they don't want to explain things. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. You're too smart for me, Sophie. You're right. It is an excuse. The truth is, I lost someone I loved very much. After that, playing hurt too much. So I stopped. Sophie absorbed this, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the keys. I lost things too, she said. I lost my sight when I was 5, tumor. They had to operate. The doctor said they saved my life, but I lost my eyes. She said it clinically, like reciting a weather report. I don't remember what Mother looks like anymore. Not really. Sometimes I think I remember, but Father says those might be memories I invented. The matter-of-fact delivery somehow made it worse. Ethan felt his throat tighten. I'm sorry, Sophie, that's not fair. No, she agreed. But Ms. Rivera, my music teacher, she says I can learn to see with sound instead. She says blind people have made some of the most beautiful music in the world. Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, Art Tatum. She says my ears might be even stronger because my eyes don't distract me. Miss Rivera sounds like a smart lady. She is, but she only comes 3 times a week, and she's teaching me the basics. I want to learn the hard parts, the parts that make people feel something. Sophie's hands hovered over the keys. This song, River Flows in You, I heard it in a movie once before the surgery. I remember it made Mother cry. She never cries. I want to learn it so I can play it for her. So maybe she'll cry again, but happy this time. Ethan's chest constricted. This girl, this fierce, brave child, was trying to reach a mother who lived in the same building but might as well have been on another planet. Can you help me? Sophie asked suddenly. Just this one part. I keep getting lost right here. She played a phrase, stumbling over the interval. Ethan looked at the piano beside the Steinway. A smaller grand, probably for practice or duets. He should say no. He should walk away, finish mopping the floor, and pretend this conversation never happened. He was a janitor. She was the CEO's daughter. There were policies, procedures, boundaries, but Sophie's face held such hope. "Okay," Ethan heard himself say. "Just this once." He crossed to the second piano, lowering himself onto the bench. The wood was cool under his palms. For 3 years, he'd avoided pianos like they carried contagion. Now, sitting here, his hands remembered everything. The curve of the keys, the weight of them, the potential. "The interval you're struggling with is a major sixth," Ethan said, his voice automatically shifting into teaching mode, a ghost of the Marine Corps musician who used to help new band members. "It's a big leap for small hands. Try thinking of it like this. You're jumping over a creek. You need momentum. Don't hesitate in the middle. Commit to the landing." He played the interval once, twice, clean and clear. The sound filled the room like light through a window. Sophie's face transformed. "Again," she breathed. Ethan played it again and again. On the fourth repetition, Sophie joined him, her small hands finding the notes on her own piano. When she nailed the interval perfectly, she gasped with delight. "I did it!" "You did." Ethan felt something warm unfold in his chest, something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not quite joy, not quite peace, but close. "Now try the whole phrase." Sophie played. Hesitant at first, then with growing confidence. When she stumbled, Ethan guided her with his own playing, showing her the rhythm, the shape of the melody. They fell into a rhythm. He would play a phrase, she would echo it, he would correct and encourage. She would try again. Minutes became an hour. The city outside the windows cycled through its late-night transformation. Bars closing, street cleaners humming, early morning delivery trucks beginning their rounds. "How do you know when you're playing it right?" Sophie asked during a break, her fingers resting lightly on the keys. "I can hear the notes, but how do you know when it's beautiful?" Ethan considered this. "Music isn't just about hitting the right notes," he said slowly. "It's about telling a story. Every song is a conversation. When you play, you're talking to the listener, telling them how you feel, what you've seen, what you've survived. The notes are just words. The music is what you mean." "What does river flows in you mean? What do you think it means?" Sophie was quiet for a long moment. "I think it's about something that keeps moving even when you want it to stop. Like time, or like missing someone. It's sad but also pretty. Like crying can be pretty sometimes." Ethan's throat closed. "Yeah," he managed. "Yeah, I think you're right." They played together then, both pianos, two separate conversations that somehow spoke the same language. Ethan's hands remembered more than he'd realized. The muscle memory was still there, dormant but intact, like a hibernating animal waking to spring. He played for Sarah, for the version of himself who'd believed love was enough. He played for Maya, for the daughter who deserved a father who was more than just functional, and he played for Sophie, for this brave girl who was learning to see the world through sound. Somewhere during the second movement, Ethan forgot he was a janitor, forgot the uniform, the mop, the careful distance he maintained from everything that used to matter. For the first time in 3 years, he was just Ethan again, the man who played piano, the man who believed music could heal. They were so absorbed in the duet that neither of them heard the office door across the hall open. Neither of them noticed the figure that appeared in the doorway of the music room, frozen in shadow. Clara Voss stood at the threshold, her hand still on the doorknob, her body rigid with shock. She'd been working late, as always, reviewing acquisition reports for the Meridian deal that would secure Helios Group's dominance in the pharmaceutical sector. Numbers, projections, risk assessments, the kind of work that required absolute focus, absolute control. She'd learned decades ago to compartmentalize, business in one box, personal life in another, emotions nowhere at all. Then she'd heard the piano. At first she'd thought it was a recording, some cleaning person playing music from their phone, but as she'd walked toward the sound, she'd recognized the song. River Flows in You. The piece she'd listened to obsessively during the divorce, the one song that could make her cry when she'd thought herself beyond tears. And then she'd reached the doorway and seen them, her daughter, her beautiful, isolated, unreachable daughter, playing piano with a janitor. Their heads were bent toward their instruments, their faces serene with concentration. They played together with the kind of synchronicity that took time to develop, the kind of partnership that required trust. Sophie was smiling, actually smiling. When was the last time Clara had seen her daughter smile like that? Clara's hand rose to her mouth, catching the sob before it could escape. She'd given Sophie everything, the best doctors, the best therapists, the best music teachers money could hire. She'd rearranged her schedule, as much as possible, to be home for dinner twice a week. She'd installed that piano, at enormous expense, so Sophie would have access to music whenever she wanted. But she'd never given Sophie this, simple, uncomplicated joy. The janitor, Ethan, she'd heard Sophie call him, played with his eyes closed, lost in the music. His hands moved across the keys with the confidence of someone who'd been playing for decades. But there was something raw in his expression, something almost painful. He played like a man confessing sins. Clara's executive brain cataloged details automatically. His maintenance uniform, name tag, E. Cole. His age, early 30s. The wedding ring absent from his left hand, but visible as a pale band where it used to be. His personnel file flickered through her mind. She'd reviewed every employee when she took over Helios 3 years ago. Ethan Cole. Hired 8 months ago. Former military. Clean record. Single father. No disciplinary issues. She'd approved his hiring with a signature and immediately forgotten his name. Now, watching him teach her daughter to play piano in the middle of the night, Clara realized she'd been wrong about nearly everything. She'd thought Sophie needed structure, expensive lessons, professional guidance. But what Sophie needed, what she'd been desperately seeking, was exactly this. Someone who played for the love of it, who understood that music wasn't about perfection, but about connection. The song wound to its conclusion, the final notes hanging in the air like a prayer. Sophie's hand stilled on the keys, her face radiant. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "You were beautiful," Ethan corrected gently. "That interval that was giving you trouble? Perfect. Every single time. Because you helped me see it different. You made it make sense." Sophie turned her face toward where Ethan sat, though her eyes couldn't find him. "Uncle Ethan? Will you come back tomorrow night? Will you teach me more?" Uncle Ethan. The nickname hit Clara like a physical blow. Sophie, who maintained careful distance from everyone except Mrs. Chen, had already adopted this stranger into her tiny circle of trust. Ethan hesitated. Clara could see the conflict in his face, wanting to say yes, knowing he probably shouldn't. "Sophie, I don't know if that's a good idea. Your mother might not." "Mother won't mind." Sophie said it with absolute confidence, the certainty of a child who'd never had to negotiate for attention. "She wants me to practice. This is practicing." "It's a little more complicated than that." "Please?" Sophie's face crumpled slightly, showing the 9-year-old beneath the poised exterior. "Ms. Rivera is good, but she teaches me like I'm broken. Like being blind means I need everything simple. You teach me like I'm normal, like I can do hard things." Clara watched Ethan's resolve crumble in real time. She saw the exact moment he made the decision, saw it in the softening of his shoulders, the way his expression shifted from caution to acceptance. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll come back. But only if it's all right with your mother, and only for a little while. I've got a daughter at home who needs me." "You're a father?" Sophie's face lit up. "What's she like?" "Her name's Maya. She's 8, almost 9. She likes dinosaurs and space and asking questions I can't answer." Ethan's voice warmed when he talked about his daughter. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me." "Does she play piano?" "No, we can't afford one, but she sings. She's got a voice like her mother." A pause. "Like her mother had." Sophie processed this, her perceptive mind putting pieces together. "Your wife died. That's who you lost." "Yes. I'm sorry, Uncle Ethan." "Me too, sweetheart." They sat in companionable silence for a moment. Then Sophie yawned, the exhaustion of the late hour finally catching up with her. "I should get you back to Mrs. Chen before she sends out a search party," Ethan said, standing from the piano bench. "Can you find your way back to your mother's office, or should I walk with you?" "I can manage. I counted the steps, remember? But thank you." Sophie slid off her own bench, her feet finding the floor with practiced certainty. "Uncle Ethan, thank you for not treating me like I'm made of glass. Thank you for reminding me why music matters." Clara stepped back from the doorway, pressing herself against the corridor wall as Sophie made her way out of the music room. Her daughter passed within 3 feet of her, trailing her fingers along the wall for orientation, humming the melody they'd just played. Clara should have announced herself, should have stepped forward, embraced her daughter, maybe even thanked the janitor for his kindness. But she couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Through the doorway, she watched Ethan Cole stand alone in the music room, his hands resting on the piano keys without playing. His head was bowed, his shoulders curved inward, and for a moment he looked utterly defeated, a man who'd just reopened a wound he'd spent 3 years trying to heal. Then he straightened, shook himself slightly, and walked out of the room without looking back. Clara remained frozen against the wall long after his footsteps faded down the corridor. Her mind raced through scenarios, consequences, possibilities. Her instinct was to control this, to manage it the way she managed everything, with clear boundaries and explicit rules. The janitor had overstepped. He'd engaged with her daughter without authorization. He'd been in an area he wasn't cleared to access during his shift. But he'd also given Sophie something Clara couldn't buy: genuine connection, unguarded kindness, the gift of being seen as capable rather than fragile. Clara's hand touched her face and came away wet. She was crying, actually crying, at work, over a piano duet she'd witnessed through a doorway. When had she become this person, so locked inside her own armor that she had to spy on her daughter's happiness from the shadows? Clara made her way back to her office on autopilot, her mind still processing what she'd witnessed. Mrs. Chen was indeed asleep in the visitor's chair, her head lolled back, soft snores escaping her lips. Sophie slipped past her unnoticed, curling up on the leather couch, where Clara had set up a makeshift bedroom for these late-night work sessions. Clara stood in her office doorway, watching her daughter settle in. Sophie's face was peaceful, content in a way Clara rarely saw. The girl pulled a blanket around her shoulders and whispered something that might have been a melody. In the morning, Clara told herself, she would figure out what to do about Ethan Cole. She would establish appropriate boundaries. She would ensure that any future interactions were properly supervised and documented. But tonight, just for tonight, she let herself feel grateful that someone, somewhere, had cared enough about her daughter to share their gift. Even if that someone was a janitor she'd never noticed before. Even if admitting that gratitude meant acknowledging how badly she'd failed at the one job that mattered more than any quarterly report. Down in the parking garage, Ethan sat in his 15-year-old Honda, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. He'd touched a piano. He'd played music. For 3 years, he'd convinced himself he was done with that part of his life, that the man who played piano had died with Sarah on Highway 42. But tonight, helping Sophie find her way through a melody, he'd remembered. Music wasn't about him. It wasn't about his grief or his guilt or his sense of loss. Music was about connection, about reaching across the space between people and saying, I see you, I hear you, you matter. Sophie needed someone to see her as more than her blindness, and somehow, accidentally, Ethan needed her too. Needed to be reminded that broken things could still create beauty, that loss didn't have to be the end of the story. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Daddy, when are you coming home? Can't sleep. Ethan smiled, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. On my way, sweetheart. 5 minutes. He started the car, but before pulling out of the parking space, he did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He pulled up Spotify and searched for River Flows in You. As the melody filled the car, Ethan Cole, janitor, widower, father, musician, drove home through the sleeping city, letting himself feel the music again, letting himself hope that maybe, just maybe, he could be more than just a man who survived. Maybe he could be a man who lived. Behind him, 20 floors up, Clara Voss stood at her office window, watching the city lights blur through her tears, wondering if she'd just witnessed a miracle or a disaster, wondering if there was any difference between the two. The next morning arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that made the city look like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Ethan woke to Maya's small hand shaking his shoulder, her voice cutting through the fog of too little sleep. Daddy, you're going to be late. It's already 7:30. He bolted upright, his heart hammering. His night shift at Helios ended at 6, which meant he had exactly 45 minutes to get Maya fed, dressed, and to school before her first bell at 8:15. The morning routine was a carefully choreographed dance of efficiency born from 2 years of single parenthood. No room for error, no space for the kind of distraction that had kept him awake until 3 in the morning, replaying piano melodies in his mind. I'm up, I'm up. Ethan swung his legs out of bed, his body protesting every movement. 42 years old, and he felt twice that, the night shift taking its toll on his back, his knees, his everything. Go brush your teeth. I'll make breakfast. Maya disappeared down the narrow hallway of their 2-bedroom apartment, her dinosaur pajamas disappearing around the corner. Ethan could hear her humming as she went, some pop song from the radio, tuneless but enthusiastic. She had Sarah's inability to carry a melody, but also her absolute confidence that this didn't matter. In the kitchen, Ethan moved on autopilot. Cereal, milk, orange juice, Maya's daily vitamin. Their apartment was small but clean, the kind of place that was supposed to be temporary 3 years ago and had somehow become permanent. The walls were the color of old manila envelopes, and the carpet had stains that predated their tenancy, but the rent was reasonable, and the landlord didn't ask too many questions about late payments during the months when Maya needed new shoes or school supplies. This was his life now. Adequate. Functional. Gray as the morning sky. Except last night had been in color. Daddy? Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair a tangled nest that would require negotiation and possibly bribery. You're smiling! You never smile in the morning! Ethan hadn't realized his face was doing anything. He touched his cheek, surprised to find his daughter was right. Just thinking about something nice. What kind of nice? Music nice. Maya's eyes widened. Her father never talked about music, not since Mom died. It was an unspoken rule in their household, like how they didn't watch the videos on Maya's iPad of the 3 of them at the beach, or how they'd packed away all of Mom's clothes except for one sweater that Daddy sometimes held when he thought Maya was asleep. Did you listen to music at work? Maya asked carefully, like approaching a stray cat. Better. I played some. Just a little. Ethan poured milk over her cereal, keeping his voice casual. There was a girl at the building, the boss's daughter. She was learning piano, and I helped her with a song. You played piano? Maya's voice cracked with something between hope and disbelief. Like you used to with Mom? The question landed like a stone in Ethan's chest. Sort of, but different. This was teaching, not performing. Maya absorbed this information while crunching her cereal. Her face cycled through expressions too complex for an 8-year-old, joy that her father had touched a piano, worry that this might hurt him, curiosity about whether this meant things could be different now. Was the girl nice? She finally asked. Very nice. She's 9, about your age. Her name is Sophie, and she's blind, but she's learning to play by feeling the music instead of reading it. That's cool. Maya paused mid-chew. Daddy, do you think you'll play with her again? Ethan thought about his promise to Sophie, about the hope in her face when she'd called him Uncle Ethan. Maybe, if her mom says it's okay. You should. Maya's voice was firm with childish certainty. You look less sad when you talk about it. The observation cut deeper than any adult criticism could have. Ethan reached across the table and squeezed his daughter's hand. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always notice. She grinned, showing the gap where her front tooth used to be. Now can you please fix my hair? I can't go to school looking like a lion. 20 minutes later, Ethan pulled up to Riverside Elementary with 3 minutes to spare. Maya's hair was tamed into something resembling braids. Not Sarah's perfect French braids, but functional enough that the other kids probably wouldn't comment. She grabbed her backpack and leaned over to kiss his cheek. Love you, Daddy. Love you more, Dinosaur. She rolled her eyes at the nickname, but smiled as she climbed out. Ethan watched her disappear through the school doors, waiting until she was completely inside before pulling away. This moment, watching her walk into the building, small and brave and so much like her mother, never got easier. His phone rang as he navigated back into traffic. The screen showed Helios Group Maine. His stomach clenched. In 8 months of working there, the main office had never called him. Maintenance issues went through his supervisor, Tony, who communicated exclusively via text message and grunts. Hello? Mr. Cole? The voice was female, professional, glacial. This is Patricia from Human Resources at Helios Group. Mr. Morrison would like to see you in his office today at 2 p.m. Please be prompt. Ethan's mouth went dry. Greg Morrison was the facilities director, Tony's boss, and therefore Ethan's boss's boss. In the corporate hierarchy of Helios, Morrison was stratospheric, the kind of manager who noticed janitors only when something went wrong. Can I ask what this is regarding? Mr. Morrison will discuss that with you at the meeting. Patricia's tone suggested that questioning was both futile and inappropriate. 2 p.m., 7th floor. Don't be late. The line went dead. Ethan drove the rest of the way home on autopilot, his mind racing through possibilities. Last night. It had to be about last night. Someone must have seen him in the music room with Sophie. Maybe there were security cameras he hadn't noticed. Maybe Mrs. Chen had woken up and reported him. Maybe Clara Voss herself had been working late and seen him with her daughter. He should have known better. Should have walked away when he first heard the piano. Should have remembered that men like him didn't get to have spontaneous moments of connection with little girls in corporate buildings after midnight. Should have remembered that the world had rules, and those rules existed specifically to keep people in their designated boxes. Back at the apartment, Ethan tried to sleep, his usual routine after night shifts, but rest was impossible. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, rehearsing explanations, apologies, defenses. None of them sounded convincing. At 1:30, he showered and put on his only suit, the same one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral and Maya's kindergarten graduation. It was slightly too tight now, the fabric shiny at the elbows, but it was the best he had. If he was going to be fired, he'd at least look like he'd tried. The 7th floor of Helios Group was a different world from the executive level where Ethan normally worked. Where the 20th floor was all glass and marble and intimidating beauty, the 7th floor was pure bureaucratic efficiency. Industrial carpet, fluorescent lighting, cubicles arranged in precise geometric patterns. This was where the machinery of the company actually operated. HR, facilities, IT, accounting. The people who made the empire function while the executives took credit. Patricia turned out to be a woman in her 50s with severely pulled back hair and reading glasses on a chain. She looked at Ethan's suit with the kind of expression that suggested she could calculate its retail value and find it wanting. "You're early," she said, as if this were somehow suspect. "I didn't want to be late." "Mr. Morrison is running behind schedule. You can wait there." She pointed to a row of chairs that looked designed to be uncomfortable. "Don't touch anything." Ethan sat, his hands folded in his lap, watching the office move around him. People passed with file folders and coffee cups, their conversations a low hum of corporate jargon. Nobody looked at him directly. He was furniture, barely visible in his cheap suit and maintenance worker invisibility. At 2:17, Patricia's phone buzzed. "Mr. Morrison will see you now. Last door on the left." Well, Greg Morrison's office was aggressively bland. Beige walls, generic motivational posters, a desk calendar featuring scenic lighthouses. Morrison himself was a soft man in his 60s, with the kind of body that suggested meals eaten at desks and exercise routinely postponed. He looked up as Ethan entered, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole, sit." Ethan sat in the visitor's chair, which was somehow even more uncomfortable than the waiting room furniture. Morrison steepled his fingers, studying Ethan with the intensity of a man about to pronounce judgment. "Do you know why you're here?" The question was clearly a trap. Admit guilt, and he'd confess to something Morrison might not even know about. Deny knowledge, and he'd seem dishonest. "I'm not certain, sir." Morrison pulled a tablet from his desk drawer, tapping the screen several times. Then he turned it around so Ethan could see. Security footage, black and white, grainy, but unmistakable. The timestamp read 11:53 p.m. The camera angle showed the corridor outside the Steinway room, and there was Ethan pushing open the door, disappearing inside. Several minutes later, Sophie emerged. Later still, Ethan walked out. "Can you explain this?" Morrison's voice was cold. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. "I heard piano music while I was cleaning. I went to investigate. Miss Voss was practicing alone. I offered to help her with a difficult section of the piece she was learning. That's all." "That's all?" Morrison's eyebrows rose. You entered a restricted area, engaged with the CEO's daughter without authorization or supervision, and spent over an hour in that room when you should have been completing your assigned duties. That's all? I didn't think. No, you didn't think. That's precisely the problem. Morrison leaned forward, his bulk making the desk chair groan. Let me explain something to you, Mr. Cole. Helios Group employs over 4,000 people in this building alone. We have policies, procedures, and protocols specifically designed to protect both our employees and our executives. Those policies exist for a reason. Do you know what happens when a maintenance worker with no background check or clearance decides to have an unsupervised conversation with a minor child on private property after midnight? I have been background checked. When I was hired, for cleaning floors, yes, not for interacting with the CEO's family. Morrison's face was flushing now, red creeping up from his collar. Do you have any idea of the liability you created? The risk? If something had happened, if that child had been injured or frightened, or if her mother had decided to pursue legal action, this company would be exposed in ways that could cost millions. Nothing happened. I helped her with a piano lesson. You overstepped. Morrison's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. You forgot your place. The words hung in the air between them, naked in their class contempt. Ethan felt something hot and sharp twist in his chest. Anger, yes, but also shame, because Morrison wasn't wrong. Ethan had overstepped. He had forgotten, for 1 hour, that he was a janitor and she was the CEO's daughter. He'd forgotten that connection across class lines was suspicious, inappropriate, something to be managed and controlled. I understand, Ethan said quietly. Do you? Morrison pulled a folder from his desk, opening it with theatrical precision. Because your employment file shows a pattern of keeping to yourself, avoiding interaction with other staff, maintaining professional distance. That's good. That's what we want. But last night suggests a serious lapse in judgment, so I need to know, can you be trusted to maintain appropriate boundaries going forward, or is this going to be an ongoing problem? Ethan thought about Sophie's face when she'd finally played that interval correctly. The pure joy, the confidence, the way she'd called him Uncle Ethan like he mattered, like he was more than just a man who pushed a mop. It won't happen again, he heard himself say. See that it doesn't. Morrison closed the folder. You're not being terminated this time. Consider this an official written warning. But Mr. Cole, if I hear about you anywhere near the 20th floor, anywhere near Clara Voss's family, anywhere except exactly where your shift assignment places you, you're done. Instantly. No second chances. Am I clear? Crystal clear, sir. Good. Get out. Ethan stood on legs that felt like water, turned and walked out of Morrison's office with what remained of his dignity. He made it to the elevator, down to the parking garage, into his car before the shaking started. He wasn't fired. He should feel relieved. Instead, he felt hollow, erased. Reminded that men like him didn't get to step outside their designated roles, not even for an hour, not even to help a blind girl learn to play piano. The drive home was a blur. Ethan picked up Maya from school at 3:15, listened to her chatter about her day with half his attention, made dinner from whatever was in the refrigerator. Spaghetti. Always spaghetti when he couldn't think. Maya pushed pasta around her plate, watching him with worried eyes. Daddy? Did something bad happen at work? Why would you think that? You have your sad face, the one you get when you're trying not to be sad. Ethan set down his fork. I got in trouble for helping that girl I told you about. Her mom's company has rules about employees talking to her family. I didn't follow the rules. But you were helping her. Sometimes helping people breaks rules. The words tasted bitter. Sometimes the rules matter more than the help. Maya considered this with the solemnity of someone much older. That's stupid. Maya. It is, though. Her face set with stubborn determination, pure Sarah in miniature. If someone needs help and you can help them, you should help them. That's what you always tell me. The world doesn't always work that way, sweetheart. Then the world is stupid. Ethan couldn't argue with that logic. They finished dinner in silence, did the dishes together, settled in for Maya's homework. But his mind was elsewhere, caught between Morrison's contempt and Sophie's joy, between the rules he was supposed to follow and the person he was supposed to be. At 9 p.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Cole. The The voice was different from Patricia's, younger, less certain. "This is Amanda Chen. I'm Sophie Voss's nanny." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Sophie okay?" "She's fine. She's—" A pause, the sound of voices in the background. "She's asking for you. She wants to know if you're coming tonight to help her practice. She's been waiting in the music room for over an hour." The image hit Ethan like a physical blow. Sophie sitting alone at that enormous piano, waiting for someone who'd been warned to stay away, believing that a promise meant something. "Mrs. Chen, I can't come." "I don't understand. Sophie said you promised." "I did promise, but I got in trouble today for being in that room with her. If I come back, I'll lose my job. I'm sorry. Tell Sophie I'm sorry." "Mr. Cole," he hung up. The phone immediately rang again. Same number. He declined the call. It rang a third time. He turned it off entirely. Maya appeared in the living room doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Who was that?" "Nobody, sweetheart. Go back to bed." "Was it the girl? Sophie?" Ethan's throat closed. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Maya padded across the room and climbed into his lap. Too big for this, really, but still small enough that he could hold her. They sat like that in the blue glow of the muted television, Ethan's daughter warm against his chest, his mind 20 floors up in a building across the city where a blind girl was learning that promises from maintenance workers didn't count. "I'm sorry, Daddy," Maya whispered. "For what?" "That people are mean to you for being nice." Ethan held his daughter tighter and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. She was right. The world was stupid. And he was tired of pretending otherwise. That night, sleep came in fragments. When Ethan finally drifted off around 2 a.m., he dreamed of pianos that turned to dust when he touched them, of music that disappeared the moment he tried to play, of Sophie's face crumbling in disappointment while he stood frozen behind a wall of corporate policy. He woke at 5:30 to his alarm, showered, dressed in his maintenance uniform, and drove to Helios Group through the pre-dawn darkness. The building looked different now, less like a place where magic could happen and more like what it actually was, a monument to money, power, and the absolute certainty that some people mattered more than others. Tony, his supervisor, was waiting when Ethan clocked in at 6. "Heard you got called to Morrison's office yesterday." Tony was a man of few words, most of them complaints. "Want to tell me what that was about?" "Just a misunderstanding." "Yeah?" "'Cause Morrison sent me an email saying to keep you away from the executive floors, said you had boundary issues." Tony's expression was unreadable. "That true?" "I helped someone who needed help. Apparently that's not allowed." Tony studied him for a long moment. "Look, Cole, I don't know what happened and I don't care. But I need this job, which means I need you to not screw up. So whatever you did, don't do it again. Understood?" "Understood." "Good. You're on floors 8 through 12 tonight. Stay there." Floors 8 through 12 were accounting and mid-level management, the least interesting areas in the building, populated by people who stayed late crunching numbers in their cubicles. Ethan pushed his cart through corridors that all looked identical, mopping floors that all felt the same under his feet, trying not to think about the 20th floor directly above his head. At 11:45 p.m., almost exactly 24 hours after he'd first heard Sophie play, Ethan's phone buzzed. He'd turned it back on before his shift, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe hoping for another call from Amanda Chen. Maybe hoping Clara Voss herself would contact him and tell him everything was fine, that Sophie understood, that nobody blamed him for trying to help. But the notification wasn't a call. It was an email sent from an address he didn't recognize. redfox2016@gmail.com. The subject line read, "Please." Ethan's hand shook as he opened it. "Dear Uncle Ethan, Mrs. Chen is helping me write this because I can't see to type. She says you're not allowed to come teach me anymore because of rules. Mother says rules are important and keep people safe, but I think some rules are wrong. You promised to help me learn river flows in you so I could play it for Mother. You promised you'd come back. Were you lying? Father says people lie to me sometimes because they feel sorry for me being blind. He says I should expect that. But you didn't seem like a lying person. You seemed like a person who keeps promises. Please come back. I'll wait every night. Yours truly, Sophie Voss. P.S. I practiced the part you taught me and I didn't make a single mistake. I want to show you. Ethan read the email 3 times, each reading making his chest tighter. The message was devastating in its simplicity. A child who didn't understand that promises made across class lines didn't count, who believed that kindness could overcome policy, who was waiting every night for someone who had been explicitly forbidden to appear. He typed and deleted 4 different responses. What could he say? Sorry, Sophie, but your mother's employees think I'm a threat to you. Sorry, but the rules that keep the corporation safe matter more than teaching you piano? Sorry, but I need this job more than you need a friend? All of it was true. None of it was acceptable to say to a 9-year-old. In the end, he typed, Dear Sophie, I'm sorry I can't come. It's not because I was lying. I really did want to help you. But sometimes adults have responsibilities that make it hard to keep promises. Keep practicing. You're doing great. I'm proud of you. Uncle Ethan. He hit send before he could reconsider, then immediately wanted to take it back. The response was cowardly, insufficient, the kind of empty adult speak that would confirm her father's cynicism about people who lied out of pity. But what else could he do? Ethan finished his shift in a fog, cleaned the last corridor on floor 12, and clocked out at 6 a.m. The parking garage was mostly empty at this hour, just a few executives' cars and the maintenance vehicles. He was halfway to his Honda when he heard footsteps behind him. Quick, purposeful, female. Mr. Cole. He turned, and his breath caught. Clara Voss stood 10 feet away, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe knot, her face composed but her eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Ms. Voss? Ethan's voice came out rough. I didn't realize you were here. I'm always here. She took a step closer, and Ethan instinctively stepped back. Something flashed across her face. Hurt? Surprise? Before the executive mask reasserted itself. I need to talk to you about my daughter. With all respect, ma'am, I've been told to stay away from your family. I don't think we should be having this conversation. I know what Morrison told you. Claire's voice was tight with controlled anger. I know he threatened your job. I know he made you feel like helping Sophie was some kind of crime. Wasn't it? The question came out sharper than Ethan intended. According to your company policy, my company policy is designed to protect children from predators and the corporation from liability. You are neither of those things. Claire's composure cracked slightly. You were kind to my daughter. You gave her something I can't. And my facilities director punished you for it because he's a small man who needs to prove his authority. Ethan blinked. I don't understand. I was there that night, in my office across the hall. I heard the piano, and I came to investigate. Claire's voice dropped. I saw you teaching Sophie. I watched the 2 of you play together. And when you left, I stood in that hallway and cried because a stranger had made my daughter smile in a way I haven't seen in 4 years. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. Ethan didn't know what to say. I should have introduced myself that night, Claire continued. I should have thanked you. Instead, I let Morrison handle it like an HR problem, and now Sophie thinks you abandoned her. She's been in the music room every night this week, waiting. Claire's voice broke slightly. She won't believe me when I tell her you're not coming. She thinks I'm lying to protect her. She thinks you're somewhere in the building and I'm keeping you away. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. I didn't mean to hurt her. You didn't hurt her. I did. Claire's face hardened with something that might have been self-loathing. I've spent 10 years building this company. I've made decisions that affected thousands of lives. I've negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But I can't figure out how to talk to my own daughter. I can't give her what she needs because I don't know what that is. And the one person who figured it out in 10 minutes is being banned from the building. Ethan shook his head slowly. Ms. Voss, I appreciate you saying this, but I can't lose this job. I have a daughter at home who depends on me. If Morrison finds out I'm even talking to you right now, Morrison doesn't give orders to me. I give orders to him. Claire's voice turned cold, executive-level decisive. Come back tonight. Teach Sophie. I'll handle the rest. You're asking me to defy a direct order from my supervisor. I'm telling you that order is rescinded. With all respect, ma'am, I don't think it works that way. Morrison made it clear. Morrison works for me, Clara interrupted. Everything in this building works for me. If I say you have authorization to teach my daughter piano, then you have authorization. End of discussion. It should have been reassuring. The CEO herself was giving him permission, overriding her facilities director, clearing away the obstacles. But something about Clara's tone, the casual assumption that her authority could bend reality, that her word was law, reminded Ethan exactly why he'd been reluctant to step into this world in the first place. Ms. Voss, he said carefully, I'm grateful for your offer, but you're asking me to trust that your support will be there if someone challenges it. Last time I trusted that everything would be fine, I nearly lost my job. What happens if Morrison or someone else decides to make an issue of this again? What happens if your protection isn't enough? Clara's expression shifted. Surprise, then something that might have been respect. You're right to be cautious. I can't guarantee that my entire organization will suddenly develop common sense, but I can guarantee that anyone who retaliates against you for helping Sophie will be looking for new employment by end of business the following day. That's a big promise. I keep my promises, Mr. Cole. They stared at each other across the parking garage. Executive and janitor, wealth and poverty, power and vulnerability. Ethan wanted to believe her, wanted to walk back into that music room and teach Sophie the rest of River Flows in You, wanted to see her face light up when she nailed a difficult section, wanted to be Uncle Ethan again instead of just employee number 7743. But trust was expensive, and he'd learned the cost of trusting the wrong people. I'll think about it, he finally said. Clara's face tightened with disappointment. Sophie doesn't have time for you to think about it. She's waiting, every night. If you don't come back, she'll believe that blind girls don't get to have nice things, that people who promise to help will always abandon her, that the world is exactly as cruel as she fears. The words hit their target. Ethan flinched. That's not fair, he said quietly. No, Clara agreed. It's not, but it's true. She turned and walked away, her heels echoing in the concrete space, leaving Ethan alone with the weight of a decision that felt far too large for his shoulders. He sat in his Honda for 20 minutes before starting the engine, Clara's words echoing in his mind. When he finally drove away, the sun was rising over the city, painting the buildings gold and crimson, beautiful and utterly indifferent to the problems of one exhausted janitor trying to figure out if kindness was worth the risk. Maya noticed the change in her father before he'd even made his decision. That afternoon, when Ethan picked her up from school, she climbed into the Honda and studied his face with the intensity of someone reading a difficult book. You're thinking about going back, she said. Not a question, a statement. Ethan pulled away from the curb, buying himself time by checking mirrors that didn't need checking. I don't know what I'm doing yet. The girl, Sophie, she needs you. It's more complicated than that, dinosaur. No, it's not. Maya's voice carried that matter-of-fact certainty that children wielded like a weapon. She needs help. You can help. You want to help. The only complicated part is you being scared. The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Ethan glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror. When had she gotten so perceptive? When had she learned to see through the careful walls he'd built around his fears? I'm not scared, he said, the lie transparent even to himself. Yes, you are. You've been scared since Mom died. Scared to play music, scared to be happy, scared to do anything except take care of me and go to work. Maya's voice softened. But Daddy, I'm okay. You don't have to keep being so careful. You don't have to keep being so sad. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. They'd never talked about this. Not directly, not honestly. They danced around it for 3 years, a silent agreement that if they didn't name his grief, it couldn't hurt them. Maya, Mom would want you to help Sophie. You know she would. Maya's reflection in the mirror showed tears tracking down her cheeks. She always said you were the best teacher she ever had. She said you made music make sense. Remember? She said that at my 6th birthday party, right before the accident, right before everything ended. Ethan pulled into a gas station parking lot, shifted into park, and turned to face his daughter fully. Maya was crying openly now, 8 years old and carrying grief she shouldn't have to understand. "Come here," he said softly. She unbuckled and climbed into the front seat, burying her face against his chest. He held her while she cried, this fierce little person who'd learned too young that the world could take away everything that mattered in a single moment. "I miss her too," Ethan whispered into his daughter's hair. "Every single day I miss her so much, it feels like drowning." "Then why did you stop playing? Music made you happy. Music made you like you." "Because every note reminded me of her. Because sitting at a piano without her felt like lying, like pretending I could be whole when half of me was gone." Maya pulled back enough to look at him, her face blotchy and wet. "But you played with Sophie. You told me it felt good." "It did. That's what scared me." "Why? Why is feeling good scary?" How could he explain it? How could he make an 8-year-old understand that happiness felt like betrayal when the person who made you happy was dead? That joy was terrifying because it could be taken away. That playing piano with Sophie had cracked open something he'd spent 3 years keeping sealed because opening it meant remembering everything he'd lost. "Sometimes," Ethan said slowly, "when something really bad happens, you get scared it'll happen again. So you try to protect yourself by not caring too much, not hoping too much, not letting yourself feel too much. Because if you don't have anything good, then nothing bad can take it away." Maya absorbed this with the gravity of someone much older. "That sounds lonely." "It is," Ethan admitted. "It's very lonely." "Then stop being lonely." She said it like it was simple, like survival was a choice rather than a grinding necessity. "Help Sophie, play music, be happy. Mom would want that. I want that." Ethan cupped his daughter's face in his hands, wiping away tears with his thumbs. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just don't listen." She managed a watery smile. "So are you going to do it? Are you going to help her?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications that stretched far beyond one blind girl and piano lessons. This was about whether Ethan could step outside the safe, gray existence he'd built, whether he could risk caring about someone other than Maya, whether he could trust that the world might not punish him for trying. "Yeah," he said finally. "Yeah, I think I am." Maya threw her arms around his neck, squeezing hard enough to make breathing difficult. "Good. Because you're a really good teacher, and it would be stupid to waste that. You really need to stop calling things stupid. I'll stop when things stop being stupid." Ethan laughed. Actually laughed, for the first time in recent memory. They stayed like that for several minutes, father and daughter holding each other in a gas station parking lot while the world rushed past their windows, indifferent and ongoing. Finally, Maya pulled back. "So what now?" "Now I go to work tonight and figure out if the CEO of the company was being honest when she said I could teach her daughter without getting fired. And if she wasn't, then we'll figure something else out. We always do." Ethan smoothed his daughter's hair, tucking a strand behind her ear. "But Maya, if this goes wrong, if I lose this job, I need you to know it wasn't your fault for pushing me. It was my choice, okay?" "Okay," she nodded solemnly. "But Daddy, it won't go wrong. I have a good feeling about this." Ethan wished he shared her certainty. But as he drove them home through the afternoon traffic, Maya chattering about her day at school with the resilience of children who could cry one moment and laugh the next, he felt something shift in his chest. Not hope exactly, not yet, but maybe the space where hope could grow if he let it. That evening, after Maya was fed and homework was checked, and she was settled in front of a nature documentary about marine biology, Ethan stood in his bedroom staring at his reflection in the closet mirror. His maintenance uniform hung on the hook behind the door. Gray, anonymous, safe. He'd worn it like armor for 8 months, the fabric a reminder of his place in the world's hierarchy. Tonight, looking at it, he felt something close to rebellion. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. 20th floor, music room. Sophie will be there at 11 o'clock p.m. Please come. Clara Voss. So it was really happening. The CEO had given him a direct invitation, which meant either she was genuinely committed to making this work, or she was setting him up for an even more spectacular fall. Ethan had no way of knowing which. At 5:30, he kissed Maya goodbye. She was staying with Mrs. Patterson next door, their usual arrangement for night shifts, and drove to Helios Group through the city's twilight transformation. The building looked different now, less threatening. Or maybe he was different. Maybe he'd been changed by Maya's tears and Clara's challenge and the memory of Sophie calling him Uncle Ethan like he was someone who mattered. Tony was at the maintenance desk when Ethan clocked in at 6, his expression neutral but watchful. "Heard something interesting today," Tony said without preamble. Ethan's stomach clenched. "What's that?" "Got an email from Morrison. Said there was an update to your access privileges. Said you're cleared for all floors now, including executive level. No restrictions." Tony's eyes narrowed. "Want to tell me how a janitor gets executive clearance?" "I honestly don't know." "Yeah?" Tony leaned back in his chair, studying Ethan like a puzzle with missing pieces. "Because Morrison doesn't just hand out clearances, and he especially doesn't hand them out to people he threatened to fire 3 days ago. So either you've got dirt on someone important, or someone important has taken an interest in you. Which is it?" "Neither. I helped someone, and I guess they appreciated it." "Must have been some help." Tony's expression remained skeptical. "Look, I don't care what you do on your own time, but if whatever's happening with you brings trouble down on this department, it becomes my problem. So I'm going to ask you one time, is this going to be a problem?" Ethan thought about Sophie waiting in the music room, about Clara's promise, about the thin line between connection and catastrophe. "I hope not." "That's not reassuring." "It's the best I can do." Tony sighed, the sound of a man who'd learned long ago that the world made no sense and fighting it was futile. "Fine. You're on floors 15 through 20 tonight. Stay out of trouble." "I'll try." "Yeah, you do that." The hours between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. stretched like taffy. Ethan moved through his assigned floors with mechanical precision, vacuuming, mopping, emptying trash, wiping down surfaces. The work was mindless enough that he could do it on autopilot, his body going through motions while his mind raced ahead to the conversation waiting for him 20 floors up. What would he say to Sophie? How did you explain to a 9-year-old that you disappeared because adults had decided kindness was dangerous? How did you rebuild trust that had been broken by forces beyond your control? At 10:45, Ethan finished the last corridor on floor 19 and pushed his cart toward the service elevator. His hands were shaking, ridiculous. He was 42 years old, a Marine veteran, a widower who'd survived loss that would have destroyed weaker people. A conversation with a blind girl shouldn't terrify him. But it did. Because this mattered. Because Sophie mattered. Because somewhere in the past week she'd become more than just the CEO's daughter. She'd become a reminder that he could still be someone other than the ghost he'd been for 3 years. The 20th floor was quiet when the elevator doors opened, the kind of silence that made every footstep echo. Most of the executive offices were dark, their occupants long gone to homes and families. Only a few lights remained. Clara Voss's corner office, the conference room where late-night strategy sessions sometimes ran past midnight, and at the end of the hall, spilling from the partially open door of the music room, a soft glow. Ethan walked toward that light like a man approaching either salvation or disaster, unable to determine which. He pushed the door open slowly. Inside, Sophie sat at the Steinway, her small figure silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. She wasn't playing, just sitting with her hands in her lap, her face turned toward the door as if she could see through the darkness. "Uncle Ethan?" Her voice was small, hopeful, terrified of being wrong. "Yeah, sweetheart. It's me." Sophie's face transformed. Joy, relief, and something that looked like vindication flooded her features. "You came! I knew you would come. Mrs. Chen said maybe you wouldn't, and Mother said I shouldn't get my hopes up, but I knew you keep your promises." The trust in her voice nearly broke him. Ethan crossed to the second piano, lowering himself onto the bench with the careful movements of someone approaching something precious. "I'm sorry I stayed away," he said. "I wanted to come back, but I was told it might cause problems. Mother fixed it." Sophie's hands found the piano keys, her fingers tracing them lovingly. She said there was a misunderstanding, but now everything is better. She said you have special permission to teach me whenever you want. Is that true? That's what she told me. Good. Sophie's face set with determination. Because I've been practicing the part you taught me, and I want to show you. I didn't make any mistakes, not even once. I'd love to hear it. Sophie positioned her hands on the keys, took a breath, and began to play. The melody of River Flows in You filled the room, hesitant at first, then gaining confidence. She navigated the interval that had troubled her before with perfect precision, her small face concentrated and serene. Ethan listened with his eyes closed, letting the music wash over him. She'd improved remarkably in just a week, her touch more confident, her timing more assured. But more than technique, there was emotion in her playing, a yearning, a reaching towards something just beyond grasp. When she finished, silence hung in the air for a moment before Ethan spoke. Sophie, that was beautiful. You've been working hard. Every day, for hours. Mrs. Chen says I'm obsessed, but I wanted to get it perfect before you came back. Did I? Is it perfect? It's close. But perfection isn't really the goal. Music isn't about playing every note exactly right. It's about making people feel something. What do you feel when I play? The question caught Ethan off guard. He considered lying, offering some gentle teacher speak about potential and progress. But Sophie deserved better than platitudes. I feel hope, he said finally. I feel like maybe broken things can be fixed. Like maybe losing something doesn't mean you stop living. Like maybe there's still beauty in the world, even when it feels like everything important is gone. Sophie tilted her head, processing this. You're talking about your wife. Yeah, I am. Do you think she'd like my playing? She'd love it. Sarah always said the best musicians were the ones who played from the heart instead of the head. You do that naturally. I have to. I can't read music, so I have to feel it instead. Sophie's fingers danced across the keys without pressing them, practicing movements. Mother says my blindness is a handicap, but sometimes I think maybe it's a gift, because I hear things other people miss. I hear the way your voice changes when you talk about your wife. It gets softer, like you're afraid the words will break if you say them too loud. I hear the way you hold your breath before you start playing, like you're asking permission from someone who isn't here. I hear all the things that eyes can't see. Ethan felt his throat tighten. You're very perceptive. That's what Mother says when I notice things she wishes I hadn't. Sophie turned her face toward him, her unseeing eyes somehow still managing to find his. Uncle Ethan, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really come back? Was it because Mother told you to, or because you wanted to? The question was direct, unflinching, the kind of honesty that only children and the very old could manage. Ethan owed her the same. Both, he admitted. Your mother made it possible by clearing away the obstacles. But I came because I wanted to, because teaching you reminds me that I used to be someone who created things instead of just surviving, because you make me want to be better. Sophie absorbed this with a small nod. Good. I'm glad it's both. Because if it was only one, it wouldn't be real. You're too smart for me, you know that? Everyone says that. I think it's because people expect blind kids to be less smart. So when we're normal smart, it seems extra smart. She grinned, the expression transforming her face from solemn to impish. But I am actually pretty smart. I get straight A's in the special school Mother sends me to. I believe it. Ethan positioned his hands on his piano. So ready to learn the next section? Yes. And Uncle Ethan, after we're done with River Flows in You, can we learn something else? Something happy. I want to learn songs that make people smile, not just cry. We can learn whatever you want. They fell into the rhythm of teaching and learning, Ethan playing phrases that Sophie echoed and refined. Time dissolved into music, the city lights outside fading into insignificance. For 2 hours they existed in a bubble, where the only things that mattered were melody and harmony and the connection between teacher and student. Ethan had forgotten how much he loved this, not performing, but teaching. Sharing music with someone who was discovering it fresh. Watching Sophie's face light up when she finally nailed a difficult section, hearing her laugh when she made a mistake and recovered gracefully. This was what he'd lost when Sarah died. Not just love, but purpose. Not just companionship, but partnership. At 1 a.m, Amanda Chen appeared in the doorway, her expression apologetic. "Sophie, sweetheart, it's time for bed. You have tutoring in the morning." "5 more minutes?" Sophie pleaded. "We're almost done with this section. You said that an hour ago." Mrs. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. "Come on, Uncle Ethan will be here tomorrow night." Sophie's face fell. "Will you?" she asked, turning toward Ethan. "Will you really be here tomorrow?" "I will. I promise." "You promised before and you didn't come." The accusation was delivered without malice, just fact. Ethan felt it land in his chest like a stone. "You're right, I did. And I broke that promise because I was scared. Scared of losing my job, scared of getting in trouble, scared of caring about someone and having it taken away." He took a breath. "But I'm here now, and I'm going to keep coming until you tell me to stop. That's a promise I won't break." Sophie considered this for a long moment. Then she stood from the piano bench, made her way across the space between them with careful steps, and wrapped her arms around Ethan's waist in a fierce hug. "Thank you for coming back," she whispered. Ethan hugged her carefully, this brave girl who'd decided to trust him despite every reason not to. "Thank you for waiting." Mrs. Chen collected Sophie with practiced efficiency, guiding her toward the door. At the threshold, Sophie turned back. "Uncle Ethan? Your wife, Sarah. I think she'd be proud of you for being brave enough to play music again." Then she was gone, leaving Ethan alone in the music room with tears streaming down his face and the lingering echo of piano notes in the air. He was still sitting there 10 minutes later when Clara Voss appeared in the doorway. She looked different than she had in the parking garage. Less CEO, more mother. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she'd shed the suit jacket in favor of just the silk blouse underneath. She looked younger, more human, more uncertain. "Mr. Cole," she said quietly, "I hope Sophie wasn't too much of a challenge tonight." Ethan wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed to be caught crying. "Not at all. She's brilliant. You should be very proud." "I am." Clara stepped into the room, maintaining careful distance. "I wanted to thank you for coming back, for keeping your promise even though I gave you every reason to doubt mine. You cleared the way. That took courage. It took a phone call to HR and an email to Morrison threatening his pension if he continued being an officious ass." Clara's mouth quirked. "Not exactly courage, more like using the power I should have used in the first place." "Still, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did." Clara moved closer, her expression serious. "Sophie is the only good thing I've done with my life. Everything else, this company, this building, all the deals and acquisitions and strategic victories, none of it matters compared to her. But I've been a terrible mother, distant, cold, more concerned with quarterly reports than whether my daughter feels loved." "I'm sure that's not true." "It is true. Sophie told me last week that she's not sure what I look like because she can't remember my face from before the surgery, and I never let her touch my face now because I'm always in a hurry." Clara's voice cracked. "My daughter doesn't know what I look like, Mr. Cole. What kind of mother lets that happen?" Ethan had no answer for that. The pain in Clara's voice was too raw, too real to deflect with platitudes. "I watched you teach her tonight," Clara continued, "from my office. I know that probably sounds creepy, but I couldn't stop myself, and I realized you give her something I can't. You see her as capable, as strong. I look at Sophie and see all the ways I failed to protect her, all the surgeries she endured, all the things she'll never do because of her blindness. But you look at her and see potential. She has incredible potential. She could be a remarkable musician if she keeps working. Because of you. Because you believe in her." Clara met his eyes fully for the first time. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Are you doing this because you want to, or because you feel obligated? Because if it's obligation, if this is just pity for a blind girl or an attempt to stay on the CEO's good side, I need to know now, before Sophie gets more attached." The question deserved a truthful answer. Ethan thought about the past week, about Maya's tears and Morrison's contempt and the suffocating weight of grief he'd carried for 3 years. He thought about the moment Sophie had hugged him, the trust in her small arms, the way playing music had cracked open the sealed places in his chest. I'm doing this because Sophie reminds me that I used to be someone who created beauty instead of just enduring. Because teaching her makes me feel alive for the first time since my wife died. Because your daughter is brave and brilliant and deserves someone who sees that. He paused. And yes, because I feel obligated, not to you or your company, but to Sophie. Because she waited for me even when she had no reason to believe I'd come back. Because she trusted me when trust was the hardest thing to give. I'm obligated to honor that. Clara's eyes glistened. Thank you, that's what I needed to hear. Can I ask you something now? Of course. Why does this matter so much to you? You could hire the best piano teachers in the world. You could give Sophie every advantage money can buy. Why am I different? Clara was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. Because you're not performing for me. You're not trying to impress the CEO or advance your career or make connections. You help Sophie because she needs help, and you know how to give it. That's incredibly rare in my world, maybe in any world. People usually want something. I do want something, Ethan said. I want to be the kind of person who helps when they can. I want my daughter to see that kindness isn't weakness. I want to prove that the past 3 years haven't completely broken me. Has it worked? Tonight was a good start. Clara smiled. A real smile. Not the corporate mask she usually wore. I'm going to arrange for you to have access to this room whenever Sophie is here. Mrs. Chen will coordinate schedules with you. And Mr. Cole, I'm authorizing a salary increase for you. Consider it compensation for the additional responsibilities. That's not necessary. It absolutely is. You're providing a service that has value. You should be paid for it. Claire's voice shifted back to CEO mode. I'll have HR draw up the paperwork. Ms. Voss, I don't want this to become a transaction. I'm not teaching Sophie for money. I know. That's exactly why you deserve to be paid. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Sophie mentioned that you have a daughter, Maya, I think, 8 years old? Almost 9. Why? Because I'd like to do something for her, as thanks. Perhaps enrollment in a good school or music lessons of her own, or no. The word came out harder than Ethan intended. Thank you, but no. I appreciate the offer, but I can provide for my daughter myself. Claire's expression shifted, surprise, then understanding, then something that might have been respect. Of course. I apologize if I overstepped. You didn't. You were being generous, but Maya and I, we're fine. We don't need charity. It wasn't charity, it was gratitude. Then be grateful by letting me keep teaching Sophie, that's all I want. Clara studied him for a long moment. You're a proud man, Mr. Cole. I'm a father who doesn't want his daughter to think her worth is measured by what wealthy people give us. Fair enough. Clara extended her hand. Thank you again. For coming back, for being the person Sophie needed. Ethan shook her hand, surprised by the firmness of her grip. I'll see you tomorrow night. I'll be here. Working late, as always. A shadow crossed her face. It's what I do. She left, and Ethan was alone again in the music room. He sat at the piano for another few minutes, letting his hands rest on the keys without playing. The ivory was cool under his fingers, familiar and foreign at once. Then, slowly, he began to play. Not River Flows in You, or anything he'd taught Sophie, but Sarah's favorite piece. The one they'd played together at their wedding. The one he hadn't touched in 3 years because it hurt too much. It still hurt. But the pain was different now. Not the sharp agony of fresh loss, but the dull ache of old wounds learning to heal. He played through tears, through memory, through the grief that had defined him for so long. And when he finished, the silence that followed felt less empty than it had before. Ethan packed up his cleaning supplies, clocked out at 6 a.m., and drove home through the city's morning transformation. The sky was turning pink and gold, the sunrise painting buildings with optimism he'd stopped believing in years ago. Maya was awake when he got home, already dressed for school, eating cereal at the kitchen table. She looked up as he entered, her eyes scanning his face for information. "How'd it go?" she asked. "Good, really good." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "You were right. Sophie needed help, and I could help. It was the right thing to do." "See, I told you." Maya grinned. "You should listen to me more often." "You're absolutely right. From now on, you're in charge of all major life decisions." "Does that mean I can get a puppy?" "Nice try, Dinosaur, but no." She laughed, and the sound filled their small kitchen with more warmth than any amount of sunshine could provide. Ethan made himself coffee and sat across from his daughter, watching her navigate her cereal with the intense concentration 8-year-olds brought to simple tasks. This was his life. This, small moments in a small apartment with a daughter who deserved better than a father who sleepwalked through existence. But maybe he could start being present. Maybe teaching Sophie could help him remember how to be fully alive. "Daddy?" Maya looked up from her cereal. "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. "Why do you ask?" "Because you look different, less sad, more like the pictures of you with Mom." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "I think maybe I am. A little bit. Is that okay?" "Of course it's okay." Maya's voice carried the bewildered tone of a child who couldn't understand why her father needed permission to be happy. "Mom would want you to be happy. I want you to be happy. You should want you to be happy." "You're right. Again, you're becoming dangerously good at being right. I learned it from Mom." They finished breakfast together, the morning routine unfolding with comfortable ease. As Ethan dropped Maya off at school, watching her skip through the doors with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, he felt something shift permanently in his chest. For 3 years, he'd been surviving, enduring each day, marking time, waiting for nothing in particular. But now, for the first time since the accident, he felt like he might be living again. It wasn't much. Just piano lessons for a blind girl in a corporate tower. Just 2 hours a night of shared music and hesitant connection. But sometimes, Ethan thought, the smallest things were actually the most important ones. Sometimes saving someone else was the only way to save yourself. He drove away from the school as the bell rang, the city spreading out before him bright and new and full of possibility. Somewhere across town, Sophie was probably waking up, getting ready for her day, maybe practicing the piano sections they'd worked on last night. And somewhere in the Helios Group tower, Clara Voss was already at her desk, making decisions that affected thousands of lives, probably not realizing that the most important decision she'd ever made was simply allowing a janitor to teach her daughter piano. The world turned, the sun rose, and 3 broken people, a widower, a blind girl, and a lonely CEO, began the slow, uncertain work of healing each other without even realizing that's what they were doing. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost like normalcy. Ethan worked his maintenance shifts, cleaned floors 8 through 20, and spent 2 hours each night teaching Sophie piano in the music room that had become their shared sanctuary. The lessons evolved beyond simple technique. They became conversations in melody, explorations of emotion through sound, a language that needed no sight to understand. Sophie bloomed under the attention. Her playing grew confident, her repertoire expanding beyond river flows in You to include Debussy, Chopin, even some contemporary pieces she'd heard on the radio and wanted to recreate. She stopped asking Ethan if her playing was good enough and started trusting her own ears to tell her. That shift, from seeking external validation to finding internal certainty, was the moment Ethan knew she'd become a real musician. But not everyone at Helios Group was happy about the arrangement. It was a Thursday night, late November, when things came to a head. Ethan was midway through his shift on floor 14 when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Come to 20th floor, music room, now. CV." Clara's messages were always brief, always direct, never explained. Ethan abandoned his mop cart and headed for the elevator, his stomach tight with the familiar anxiety that came from being summoned by people with power. 3 weeks of peaceful lessons hadn't erased the memory of Morrison's office, the threat of termination, the reminder that his place in this building was provisional at best. The 20th floor was darker than usual, most offices already empty for the night, but light spilled from Clara's corner office, and as Ethan approached, he heard voices, raised, angry, clashing like discordant notes. Completely inappropriate, and you know it. That was Morrison, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. I don't care what authorization you've given him. The optics alone are disastrous. A male janitor spending unsupervised time with your 9-year-old daughter, do you have any idea how that looks? I know exactly how it looks. Clara's voice was ice cold, the executive tone that probably terrified board members. It looks like a qualified musician teaching a blind child to play piano, which is exactly what's happening. You're being deliberately obtuse. The man is maintenance staff. He has no credentials, no teaching certification, no background in music education. He was a member of the United States Marine Corps band for 8 years. He's played professionally. He understands music better than any of the overpriced instructors I've hired. Clara's words cracked like a whip. And more importantly, Sophie trusts him. She's happier than I've seen her in years. That matters more than your paranoid concerns about optics. It's not paranoia, it's liability management. If something were to happen, if there were even an accusation, this company would be destroyed in the press. Helios CEO allows janitor unsupervised access to daughter. Can you imagine the headlines? Ethan stood frozen outside the office door, his hand raised to knock, unable to move forward or back. He'd known this was coming, had felt it building in the sidelong glances from other maintenance staff, in the whispers that stopped when he entered break rooms. In the careful distance everyone maintained now that he was the janitor who'd somehow become the CEO's daughter's piano teacher. Mr. Morrison, Clara's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. I'm going to say this once, so listen carefully. Ethan Cole is teaching my daughter because he's good at it and because she needs him. Your job is to ensure the facilities of this building run smoothly, not to police my parenting decisions or project your own sick imagination onto an innocent situation. Are we clear? I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection from a man who's shown my daughter nothing but kindness and respect. What I need is for my employees to do their jobs without questioning my judgment. A pause, heavy with threat. Unless you're suggesting you can't do that. Morrison's voice, when it came, was strangled with suppressed rage. Of course I can do my job, Ms. Voss. Excellent. Then this conversation is over. You're dismissed. Footsteps approached the door. Ethan barely had time to step back before Morrison emerged, his face flushed red, his jaw clenched so tight the muscles jumped. He saw Ethan and stopped, his expression twisting into something ugly. Enjoying your special treatment, Cole? Morrison's voice was low, venomous. Think you've got it made now that you're the CEO's pet project? Let me tell you something, people like you don't last. You'll screw up eventually, and when you do, I'll be there to make sure you never work in this industry again. Mr. Morrison, don't. Morrison stepped closer, invading Ethan's space with the aggressive confidence of a man who'd spent his life wielding petty power. You think you're different, special? You're maintenance staff. You'll always be maintenance staff. And the second Clara Voss gets bored of her charity case, you'll be back to mopping floors and taking orders from people like me. Remember that. He shouldered past Ethan and stalked toward the elevators, his expensive shoes clicking against marble with sharp, angry precision. Ethan stood in the hallway, his hands shaking, Morrison's words echoing in his head. People like you. The contempt in that phrase was naked, undisguised. People like you, poor, working class, disposable. People who should know their place and stay in it. Mr. Cole? Clara appeared in her office doorway, her expression carefully neutral. I apologize for that scene. Morrison is having difficulty adjusting to the new arrangement. Is he right? The question came out before Ethan could stop it. Am I a liability? Are you risking your reputation to let me teach Sophie? Clara studied him for a long moment. Come inside. We should talk. Her office was precisely what Ethan had expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture in steel and leather, abstract art that probably cost more than his annual salary. Everything was immaculate, ordered, controlled. Even the family photos on her desk were arranged with geometric precision. Sophie at various ages, Clara and Sophie together, conspicuously absent any photos of Sophie's father. Sit. Clara gestured to one of the visitor chairs while she moved behind her desk. The positioning was deliberate, Ethan realized, establishing hierarchy, maintaining professional distance even while discussing personal matters. He sat, feeling acutely aware of his maintenance uniform, the smell of cleaning products that clung to his clothes, the class divide that yawned between them like a canyon. Morrison is an ass, Clara said bluntly. He's been with the company for 20 years and thinks that gives him the right to question my decisions. It doesn't, but he's not entirely wrong about optics. Ethan's stomach sank. So you want me to stop teaching Sophie? No. I want you to understand the situation you've walked into. Clara leaned forward, her hands clasped on the desk. I'm a woman who runs a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company. I'm divorced, single, raising a disabled child while maintaining a corporate empire. There are people, shareholders, board members, competitors, who would love nothing more than to find a scandal they could use against me. CEO shows poor judgment with daughter's care would be a gift to them. Then maybe Morrison's right. Maybe I should back away before... Let me finish. Clara's voice sharpened. Those people exist. That threat is real. But here's what matters more. Sophie is happy. For the first time since her surgery, she wakes up excited about something. She talks about music constantly. She practices without being asked. Last week, she told me she wants to perform at her school's winter recital, something she's refused to do for 4 years because she was afraid of being judged for being blind. Ethan felt his throat tighten. She didn't tell me that. She wants to surprise you. She's planning to play River Flows in You. Clara's expression softened slightly. That's because of you. Because you see her as capable instead of fragile. Because you treat her like a musician who happens to be blind instead of a blind girl who's trying to play music. She is capable. She's remarkable. I know, but I needed you to show me that. Clara's voice dropped. I've been a terrible mother, Mr. Cole. I know that. I've prioritized this company over my daughter, told myself I was building a legacy for her while actually just avoiding the uncomfortable reality that I don't know how to connect with her. But watching you teach her, seeing how you talk to her, it's shown me what I've been missing, what she's been missing. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. Ethan didn't know what to say. So no, Clara continued, I'm not asking you to stop teaching Sophie. I'm asking you to help me understand how you do it, how you connect with her, how you make her believe she can do difficult things. I treat her like I'd treat any student. I expect her to work hard. I don't make excuses for her blindness. I just work around it, find different ways to explain things. It sounds simple when you say it like that. It is simple. Sophie doesn't need pity or lowered expectations. She needs someone to believe she's capable of exactly what sighted children are capable of. She just needs different tools to get there. Clara nodded slowly, processing this. Show me. What? Show me how you teach her. I want to watch a lesson, not from my office, but actually in the room. I want to understand what's working so I can learn to be a better mother. The request caught Ethan completely off guard. I don't know if that's a good idea. Sophie might feel self-conscious with you watching. Then we won't tell her I'm watching. There's a small practice room next door with a window that looks into the music room. I can observe without interfering. Clara's expression was determined. Please, Mr. Cole, I'm asking as a mother, not as your employer. Help me understand my daughter. Ethan wanted to say no. Wanted to explain that having the CEO watch him teach would make him self-conscious, that the magic of his lessons with Sophie came from the privacy of them, the sense that they existed in their own world, separate from corporate hierarchies and class divisions. But the vulnerability in Clara's face stopped him. This powerful woman who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals was asking for help understanding her own child. That took courage. Okay, Ethan said. But if Sophie senses something's wrong, if she gets uncomfortable, we stop immediately. Agreed. They synchronized watches like co-conspirators planning a heist, which was absurd and somehow appropriate. Clara would position herself in the practice room before 11, when Sophie usually arrived for her lesson. Ethan would teach as he normally did, pretending he didn't know he was being observed. At 10:45, Ethan finished his cleaning rounds and made his way to the music room. His hands were shaking again, but for different reasons now. Having Clara watch him teach felt exposing, like performing surgery while someone graded his technique. Sophie arrived at 11 exactly, guided by Mrs. Chen, who settled her at the Steinway and then withdrew to her usual spot in the hallway where she read romance novels and occasionally dozed. Uncle Ethan! Sophie's face lit up. I've been practicing something new, something secret. Can I show you? Always. But first, let's warm up with scales. You know the rules. Sophie groaned dramatically, but positioned her hands and began running through C major, her fingers finding the right keys through muscle memory and spatial awareness. Ethan accompanied her on the second piano, playing harmony that turned the simple scale into something musical. They moved through the warm-up routine, scales, arpeggios, a simple Bach prelude Sophie had memorized. Then she turned to him with barely contained excitement. Okay, now, can I show you my secret? Hit me. Sophie's hands found the keys, and she began to play something Ethan didn't recognize immediately. A contemporary piece, complex rhythms, jazz-influenced harmonies. She stumbled once, corrected herself, continued with growing confidence. The melody was playful, sophisticated, nothing like the classical pieces they'd been working on. When she finished, she was bouncing slightly on the bench. Do you know what that was? I don't, but it was beautiful. Where did you learn it? I heard it in a movie Mrs. Chen was watching. I made her replay the scene 15 times so I could figure out the notes. It's called La La Land theme. Did I get it right? Ethan felt a surge of pride so strong it was almost painful. You got it exactly right. Sophie, that's remarkable. You learned that completely by ear. I have good ears, said with such matter-of-fact confidence that Ethan laughed. Uncle Ethan, do you think I could play at my school's winter recital? The one in 3 weeks? There it was, the question Clara had predicted. Ethan chose his words carefully, knowing that how he responded would shape Sophie's confidence for years to come. Do you want to play at the recital? Yes, but I'm scared. Scared of what? Sophie's face scrunched in concentration as she tried to articulate fears she barely understood. Scared that people will think I'm only performing because I'm blind and they feel sorry for me. Scared that I'll make mistakes and everyone will blame it on me not being able to see. Scared that... She trailed off. Scared that what, sweetheart? Scared that Mother will be disappointed if I'm not perfect. The admission was so quiet, Ethan almost missed it. He glanced at the window to the practice room, knowing Clara was behind the glass, hearing her daughter's deepest fear articulated for the first time. Sophie, can I tell you something about performing? She nodded, her face serious. The best performers aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who make the audience forget mistakes matter. When you play, people won't be thinking about whether you're blind or sighted or anything else. They'll just be feeling the music. That's the power of what you do. You make people feel things. But what if I mess up? What if I forget a section or play wrong notes? Then you keep going. You improvise. You turn the mistake into something intentional. Ethan played a deliberately wrong chord, then resolved it into something beautiful. See? Mistakes are just opportunities to be creative. The audience doesn't know what you plan to play. They only know what they hear. So make what they hear beautiful, even if it's not what you practiced. Sophie absorbed this, her fingers tracing patterns on the keys. Will you be there? At the recital? If you want me there, I'll be there. I want you there. And I want Mother there too, but I don't think she can come. She's always working. Have you asked her? No, I don't want her to feel bad saying no. Ethan's heart broke for this child who'd learned to manage her mother's schedule and emotions instead of being able to simply need her. Sophie, I think you should ask. I think your mom would want to know you want her there. Really? Really? Sometimes parents are so busy taking care of everything else that they forget to check if their kids actually want them around. Maybe your mom needs to be reminded that you need her. Sophie nodded slowly. Okay, I'll ask. But Uncle Ethan, if she can't come, you'll definitely be there, right? I promise, nothing could keep me away. They moved on to practicing the pieces Sophie wanted to perform, a shortened version of River Flows in You and the La La Land theme she'd taught herself. Ethan worked with her on dynamics, on shaping phrases, on telling a story through the music. He pushed her to be more than technically correct, to be emotionally honest, to let the audience hear her heart through her hands. At 12:30, Mrs. Chen collected Sophie for bed. The girl hugged Ethan goodbye, whispering her thanks. already humming the melodies they'd practiced. After they left, Ethan sat alone at the piano, exhausted in the way that teaching always exhausted him. A good tired, the kind that came from giving everything to help someone else grow. The door to the practice room opened, and Clara emerged. Her face was wet with tears. "Ms. Voss, she thinks I'll be disappointed if she's not perfect." Clara's voice was raw, stripped of all executive polish. "She's 9 years old and she's already learned to manage my feelings instead of asking for what she needs." Ethan stood awkwardly, unsure whether to offer comfort or maintain professional distance. Kids are perceptive. They learn early what they can ask for and what they can't. I did that to her. I made her afraid to need me. You can undo it. It's not too late. Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so unguarded it was almost shocking. How do you make it look so easy? Connecting with her? It's not easy. It's just, I see who she is instead of who I'm afraid she'll become. You look at Sophie and see all the ways you failed to protect her. The tumor, the blindness, all the things you couldn't prevent. But she doesn't need you to protect her from what already happened. She needs you to believe in who she is now. That's what you do when you teach her. I see a musician who happens to be blind. You see a blind girl who's trying to be a musician. The difference matters. Clara absorbed this like a physical blow. You're right. God, you're right. I've been so focused on accommodating her disability that I've made it her defining characteristic. It doesn't have to stay that way. Will you help me change it? The question was desperate, vulnerable, nothing like the commanding CEO who ruled boardrooms. Will you show me how to see her the way you do? Ethan thought about Morrison's warnings, about the danger of getting too involved with the Voss family, about the class divide that made this whole situation precarious. But then he thought about Sophie's face when she'd asked if he'd be at her recital, the trust in her voice when she called him Uncle Ethan. I'll try, he said, but you have to do the work. I can't connect with your daughter for you. I know. I'm asking you to teach me how to connect with her myself. Clara straightened, reassembling her executive armor. The winter recital is in 3 weeks. I want to be the kind of mother who can sit in that audience and watch my daughter perform without worrying about whether she's perfect. I want to be the kind of mother who she trusts to ask for what she needs. Can you help me get there? I can try, but Clara, he used her first name without thinking, too caught up in the moment to remember hierarchy. You have to actually show up, not just physically, but emotionally. Sophie doesn't need a CEO. She needs a mom. I know. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. I'm just not sure I remember how to be one. Then learn, for her. They stood in the quiet music room, executive and janitor, mother and teacher, 2 people trying to figure out how to help a 9-year-old girl feel loved and capable and seen. Finally, Clara nodded. Thank you for your honesty, for teaching her, for showing me what I've been missing. Thank you for letting me, for trusting me with something that matters. Clara left, her heels clicking down the marble corridor, and Ethan was alone with the pianos and the city lights and the weight of what he'd just agreed to. Teaching Sophie was one thing. Teaching her mother to be present was something else entirely. He cleaned up the music room, organizing sheet music, adjusting piano benches, creating order from the beautiful chaos of the lesson. His phone buzzed as he was leaving. A text from Clara. The recital is December 18th at 7 p.m. Sophie's school, Bancroft Academy. I'm going to be there. Thank you for giving me the push I needed. Ethan saved the date in his phone, then added a note. Buy Sophie flowers. Talk to Maya about attending. The next 3 weeks moved with startling speed. Sophie practiced obsessively, her pieces becoming cleaner, more confident, infused with the emotional honesty Ethan had encouraged. Clara began appearing at the music room during lessons, not watching from behind glass, but actually present, sitting quietly in the corner, learning to see her daughter through new eyes. The first time Clara sat in on a lesson, Sophie froze. Mother, what are you doing here? I wanted to hear you play. If that's all right. Sophie's face cycled through confusion, suspicion, hope. You're not working. Work can wait. This is important. Something shifted in the room then. A rebalancing of priorities, a quiet acknowledgement that presence mattered more than productivity. Sophie played with extra care that night, showing off for her mother, occasionally glancing in Clara's direction as if to confirm she was really there. After the lesson, Clara approached the piano and did something Ethan had never seen before. She touched Sophie's face, tracing her daughter's features with gentle fingers. "I'm sorry I never let you do this before," Clara said softly. "I was always in such a hurry. But you should know what I look like." Sophie's hands rose to mirror the gesture, her small fingers exploring her mother's face with wonder and concentration. "You have strong bones," Sophie said, "and laugh lines by your eyes, even though I don't hear you laugh very much." "Maybe I should laugh more." "Maybe you should." Ethan slipped out of the room, giving them privacy for this moment of connection. He stood in the hallway feeling like he'd witnessed something sacred, a mother and daughter learning to see each other clearly for the first time. The lessons continued with Clara as a regular presence, and slowly, Sophie began to open up in ways she hadn't before. She talked about her fears, her frustrations with being blind, her loneliness at her special school, where everyone treated her like she might break. Clara listened, really listened, in a way she'd apparently never done before. And in listening, she learned. She learned that Sophie hated when people grabbed her arm without warning, that she loved the smell of rain and the sound of wind chimes, that she dreamed of traveling someday, of experiencing the world through sound and touch and taste instead of just staying safe in familiar spaces. "I want to go to Paris," Sophie said one night, her hands resting on the piano keys. "I want to hear the street musicians and taste real croissants and feel the cobblestones under my feet. Ms. Rivera says Paris is the most beautiful city in the world, but I think maybe I could find my own kind of beautiful there." Clara's face, watching from the corner, was a study in revelation and regret. "We'll go," she said suddenly. "Next summer. Just you and me. We'll spend a whole month in Paris." Sophie's face lit up. "Really? You promise?" "I promise." Ethan watched this exchange with quiet satisfaction. This was what Sophie needed. Not piano lessons, but a mother who could imagine futures beyond disability, who could promise adventures instead of just accommodations. The night before the recital, Sophie asked Ethan to stay late after their lesson. "I have something for you," she said, reaching into the pocket of her dress. She pulled out a small box, handling it carefully. "Mrs. Chen helped me buy it. Open it." Inside was a silver bracelet, simple and elegant, with an engraving on the inner surface. "Hear with your heart." "Sophie, this is too much." "No, it's not. You taught me that music isn't about seeing or even about playing the right notes. It's about hearing with your heart and making other people hear with theirs too." Her face was serious. "I want you to have this so you remember that the best things in life aren't the ones we can see. They're the ones we feel." Ethan's hands shook as he fastened the bracelet around his wrist. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll treasure this." "Good," Sophie smiled. "And Uncle Ethan? I'm not scared anymore. About the recital, I'm excited." "You should be excited. You're going to be amazing." "I know," said with such simple confidence that Ethan laughed. "I'm not scared because you'll be there, and Mother will be there, and even if I make mistakes, I know you'll still be proud of me." "I'm already proud of you." The next evening, December 18th, arrived cold and clear. Ethan picked up Maya from school early, taking her home to change into her nicest dress, a blue thing Sarah had bought for her 7th birthday that was already getting too short in the sleeves. He wore his funeral suit again, the only nice clothes he owned, and tried not to think about how out of place they'd probably be at Bancroft Academy, where tuition cost more than most people's annual salary. The school was exactly what Ethan expected: brick and ivy and old money, the kind of place that had been educating the children of wealth for over a century. The auditorium was small but exquisite, with dark wood paneling and acoustics designed for chamber music. They arrived early, Ethan clutching the bouquet of flowers he'd bought for Sophie. Nothing expensive, just carnations and baby's breath from the grocery store, but chosen with care. Maya held his hand tightly, her eyes wide as she took in the elegantly dressed parents filing into seats. "Daddy," she whispered, "everyone here looks rich." "That's because they probably are. But we belong here too. We're here to support Sophie." They found seats in the middle section, close enough to see but not so close as to be presumptuous. The program listed 12 student performers, all children from Bancroft's arts program. Sophie was listed 10th, playing River Flows in You by Yuruma. The lights dimmed. The recital began. The first performers were technically proficient but emotionally sterile, children who'd been taught to hit the right notes but not to feel the music. Ethan watched politely, applauded at the right moments, and tried not to let his nervousness show. Then Sophie's name was called. She emerged from backstage, guided by her teacher, wearing a simple white dress that made her look ethereal and impossibly young. The audience fell into a particular kind of silence, the hush that came when people didn't know whether to be impressed or pitying. Sophie settled at the piano with careful precision, her hands finding the keys, her face serene. She took a breath, and Ethan saw her mouth move in what looked like a prayer, or maybe just a reminder to herself. Then she began to play. The first notes of River Flows in You filled the auditorium, and something magical happened. The melody that Sophie had struggled with just weeks ago now flowed from her fingers with liquid grace. She didn't just play the notes, she told a story with them, weaving emotion and memory and hope into every phrase. Ethan felt tears streaming down his face and didn't bother to wipe them away. Beside him, Maya gripped his hand so tightly it hurt. Around them, the audience had gone absolutely still, caught in the spell of a blind 9-year-old playing with her whole heart. Sophie made one mistake, a slight hesitation in the third section, but she recovered so smoothly that most people probably didn't notice. She turned the stumble into a moment of quiet reflection, making it seem intentional, exactly like Ethan had taught her. When the final notes faded, silence hung in the air for 3 full seconds. Then the audience erupted in applause that sounded like thunder. Sophie stood and curtsied, her face glowing with joy and relief. She turned toward where Ethan and Maya sat, though her eyes couldn't find them, and smiled. The rest of the recital passed in a blur. When it finally ended, Ethan and Maya pushed through the crowd of parents toward the stage. Sophie was surrounded by well-wishers, her teacher introducing her to various parents and benefactors, but when she heard Ethan's voice calling her name, her face lit up. "Uncle Ethan, did you hear? Did I do okay?" "You were perfect." He pressed the flowers into her hands. "No, better than perfect. You were real. I felt like I was flying, like the music was carrying me somewhere else." Sophie buried her face in the flowers, inhaling deeply. "Carnations, my favorite. How did you—" "I can smell them. They smell like hope." Maya tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Can I meet her?" "Sophie, this is my daughter Maya. She's been dying to meet you." Sophie turned her face toward Maya's voice. "You're the dinosaur girl. Uncle Ethan talks about you all the time." "He talks about you too." Maya's voice was shy but warm. "You play really, really good." "Really, really well," Ethan corrected automatically. "That too." The girls laughed, and Ethan saw the beginning of a friendship forming, but then a voice cut through the crowd, commanding and familiar. "Mr. Cole!" Clara Voss approached through the press of people, her presence parting crowds like Moses dividing water. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but not showy, and her face was radiant with pride and joy that transformed her usual severity into something approaching beauty. "Ms. Voss." Ethan suddenly felt acutely aware of his cheap suit, the grocery store flowers, the way he and Maya probably looked like charity cases amid all this wealth. But Clara wasn't looking at him with judgment. She was looking at Sophie with wonder. "My darling girl," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "You were magnificent." "Mother, you came! You actually came!" Sophie launched herself toward her mother's voice, and Clara caught her, holding her tight in a way that looked unpracticed but sincere. "Of course I came. I wouldn't have missed it for anything." Clara pressed a kiss to Sophie's hair. "I'm so proud of you, not just for your playing, but for your courage, for being brave enough to share your gift with the world." Sophie clung to her mother, her face buried against Clara's shoulder. "I was so scared you'd be disappointed if I wasn't perfect." "Oh, Sophie." Clara pulled back enough to frame her daughter's face with her hands. "You were perfect because you were yourself. I don't need you to be flawless. I just need you to be happy." The moment was so intimate that Ethan felt like an intruder witnessing it. He started to back away to give them privacy, but Clara's voice stopped him. "Mr. Cole, wait, please." She straightened, one arm still around Sophie's shoulders. What you saw tonight, what everyone saw, that was because of you. You gave my daughter the confidence to be extraordinary. Thank you." The words were sincere, but they were also loud enough for surrounding parents to hear. Ethan saw heads turn, curiosity rippling through the crowd. Who was this man the CEO of Helios Group was thanking? Why did he matter? "I just helped her practice," Ethan said quietly. "Sophie did all the hard work herself." "He's being modest," Sophie interjected. "Uncle Ethan taught me everything. He taught me that being blind doesn't mean I can't make beautiful things. He taught me to hear with my heart." The phrase, "hear with your heart," echoed with perfect symmetry. Ethan touched the bracelet on his wrist, meeting Sophie's unseen gaze with gratitude. Clara noticed the gesture, saw the bracelet, and something flickered across her face, understanding perhaps, or recognition that the bond between her daughter and this janitor was deeper than she'd realized. "Mr. Cole," Clara said carefully, "could you join Sophie and me for dinner? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. A proposal, really, about Sophie's future and your role in it." Every instinct Ethan had screamed caution. Dinners with CEOs led to obligations, to entanglements, to situations where the power imbalance could crush someone like him without even trying. But Sophie was looking at him with such hope, and Maya was tugging on his sleeve with excitement, and for once in his careful, cautious life, Ethan decided to take the risk. "Okay," he said. "We'd be honored." Clara smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "Excellent. I know a place nearby, quiet, family-friendly. We can talk there." As they gathered their things and prepared to leave, Ethan caught sight of Morrison in the back of the auditorium. The facilities director stood with his arms crossed, his face dark with disapproval, watching this interaction with the intensity of someone cataloging ammunition for future battles. But for tonight, surrounded by Sophie's joy and Maya's excitement, and even Clara's unexpected warmth, Ethan decided Morrison's disapproval didn't matter. Some things were worth the risk. Some people were worth fighting for. And as they left Bancroft Academy together, janitor and CEO, blind pianist and her biggest fan, 2 daughters and 3 adults learning to trust each other, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the future could be different than the past. The restaurant Clara chose was nothing like the places Ethan had imagined wealthy people ate. No white tablecloths or intimidating wine lists, or waiters who looked down their noses at anyone without a trust fund. Instead, it was a small Italian place tucked into a side street, the kind of family-run establishment where the owner greeted Clara by name and immediately pulled together 2 tables to accommodate their party of 5. "Ms. Voss, and the beautiful Sophie, come, come, I have the perfect spot for you." Giuseppe, the owner, was a round man with flour on his apron and genuine warmth in his voice. He noticed Ethan and Maya with interest, but no judgment. "Friends of yours?" "Very important friends," Clara said, and the way she said it made Ethan's throat tighten. "Giuseppe, this is Ethan Cole and his daughter Maya. They're the reason Sophie played so beautifully tonight." "Ah, then tonight you are family. Family eats for free." "Giuseppe," Clara started, but the man waved her off. "I don't argue with you about business. You don't argue with me about hospitality. It's settled." They settled into their seats, Sophie and Maya immediately bonding over the breadbasket, while the adults pretended not to watch them with anxious parental concern. Mrs. Chen had stayed behind at Bancroft to collect Sophie's things, giving them this rare moment of normalcy. Ethan felt desperately out of place. The other diners were clearly regulars, comfortable, well-dressed, the kind of people who belonged in places where CEOs ate dinner. He was acutely aware of his worn suit, Maya's too short dress, the way they probably looked like charity cases Clara had taken pity on. But Clara seemed oblivious to the class divide. She ordered for the table with the ease of someone who'd been coming here for years. Pasta for the girls, chicken marsala for herself, leaving Ethan to choose whatever he wanted. He picked the cheapest entree he could find, old habits of scarcity dying hard. "So," Clara said once their drinks arrived, wine for her, soda for the girls, water for Ethan, who was too nervous to risk alcohol. "I want to discuss something important. A proposal, like I mentioned." Ethan's stomach clenched. Here it came, the catch, the complication, the moment where Clara's generosity revealed itself to be something more complex and demanding. "I'm listening," he said carefully. Clara glanced at Sophie and Maya, who were absorbed in a conversation about whether dinosaurs or dolphins were cooler. Satisfied the girls weren't paying attention, she leaned forward. "I've watched you teach Sophie for the past few weeks. What you do, it's remarkable. Not just the music instruction, but the way you build her confidence, help her see herself as capable. That's a gift, Mr. Cole, a real gift." "Thank you, but let me finish." Claire's voice took on the executive tone that probably silenced boardrooms. "Helios Group has a charitable foundation. We fund various initiatives, medical research, educational programs, community development. But I've been thinking we need something different, something focused on kids like Sophie, children with disabilities who have gifts that traditional education systems don't know how to nurture." Ethan's pulse quickened. "What are you proposing?" "I want to create a music program. The Helios Foundation for Music and Inclusion. Free lessons for any child who wants them, regardless of ability or disability. Adaptive instruments, specialized instruction, performance opportunities. A place where being different isn't a limitation, it's just another way of experiencing music." The vision was beautiful, ambitious, exactly the kind of thing that could change lives. But Ethan couldn't see where he fit into it. "That sounds amazing, Ms. Voss, but I don't understand what this has to do with me." Clara met his eyes directly. "I want you to run it. Director of the foundation. You'd oversee the program, hire instructors, work with students. Use your gift to help kids who need exactly what you gave Sophie." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and tempting in equal measure. Ethan felt like he'd been offered something too good to be real, the kind of opportunity that came with strings attached or turned out to be a misunderstanding. "I'm a janitor," he said finally. "I don't have a degree in music education. I don't have credentials or experience running programs. You have 8 years in the Marine Corps band. You have whatever training that required. You have a gift for connecting with students and helping them find their voices." Claire's expression was intense, convinced. "And more importantly, you understand what it means to lose something and find your way back to it. That empathy, that lived experience, that's worth more than any credential." "But I have a daughter to support. I can't just quit my job on the hope that a foundation position works out." "It's not hope. It's a guarantee. The position comes with a salary of $90,000 annually, full benefits, and a budget to build the program however you see fit." Clara said the number like it was nothing, but to Ethan it might as well have been $1 million. "You'd start immediately after the new year. We'd provide funding for the first 5 years, with the goal of becoming self-sustaining through grants and donations after that." Ethan's mind raced, trying to process what she was offering. $90,000, more than double what he made as a janitor, enough to move out of their cramped apartment, enough to give Maya opportunities he'd never been able to afford. A job that involved music instead of mops, creation instead of maintenance, purpose instead of just survival. It was everything he'd stopped letting himself dream about 3 years ago, which meant it was terrifying. "Ms. Voss, I'm honored, truly, but it's too much. I don't know if I'm qualified." "You taught my daughter to believe in herself. You're qualified." Claire's voice softened slightly. "I know this is overwhelming. I know I'm asking you to take a leap of faith. But, Mr. Cole, Ethan, I've built a career on reading people, on knowing who can deliver and who will disappoint. You're someone who delivers. You're someone who keeps promises even when it costs you. That's who I want running this foundation." Ethan looked at Maya, who'd abandoned her conversation with Sophie to watch him with wide, hopeful eyes. His daughter, who deserved stability, who deserved a father who did more than just survive each day. His daughter who'd told him weeks ago that he seemed less sad when he talked about music. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "This is a big decision. I need time." "Of course. Take the weekend. We can discuss details on Monday." Clara pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. "My direct number. Call any time, day or night, if you have questions." The card was heavy, expensive, embossed with Helios Group's logo. Ethan tucked it into his pocket like it might burn him. Dinner arrived, breaking the tension. The food was exceptional, homemade pasta that melted on the tongue, sauce that tasted like someone's grandmother had been cooking it for hours. Maya ate with the single-minded focus of a child presented with something delicious, while Sophie navigated her plate with practiced precision, occasionally asking Clara to describe what was where. Watching them, Ethan felt something shift in his chest. These two girls, his daughter and the blind pianist who'd accidentally changed his life, chattering away like old friends. Clara, watching Sophie with a softness that transformed her from intimidating CEO to just a mother who loved her child. This moment of connection across class lines, across the barriers that usually kept people like him separate from people like them. Maybe it could work. Maybe he could step into this new role and not fail spectacularly. Maybe the universe was offering him a second chance, and he should be brave enough to take it. Uncle Ethan? Sophie's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Are you going to take Mother's job offer? Sophie, that's private. Clara started, but Sophie waved her off. He's thinking about it. I can hear it in how quiet he got. She turned her face toward where Ethan sat. You should take it. You're a really good teacher, and there are lots of kids like me who need someone who sees them as more than their disability. You could help so many people. She's right, Maya added, her voice fierce with conviction. You should do it, Daddy. You've been sad for so long. This makes you happy. Out of the mouths of babes. Ethan felt tears prick his eyes at his daughter's perception, at the way she'd carried the weight of his grief without complaint, at her desperate hope that he might choose joy. I'll think about it seriously, he promised. That's the best I can do right now. That's all I ask, Clara said. They finished dinner with easier conversation, Sophie and Maya making plans for a play date, Clara surprising everyone by admitting she couldn't cook to save her life and survived primarily on takeout and Giuseppe's pasta. The check never came, Giuseppe refusing payment with Italian stubbornness, and eventually they spilled out onto the sidewalk into the December night. The city was dressed for Christmas, lights strung across streets, storefront windows displaying elaborate scenes. Sophie tilted her face up toward the sky like she could sense the decorations even if she couldn't see them. I can hear the lights, she said wonderingly. They make a humming sound, like they're singing. That's the electricity, Clara said, but Sophie shook her head. No, Mother, it's more than that. Everything makes music if you listen right. The city is full of songs. They said their goodbyes on the sidewalk, Clara's driver pulling up in a sleek black car to collect her and Sophie. The girls hugged with promises to see each other soon, and then Clara turned to Ethan. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything you've done. Regardless of what you decide about the foundation, I hope you know you've changed our lives. You've changed mine too, Ethan admitted. I forgot music could be joyful instead of just painful. Sophie reminded me. Then we helped each other. Claire extended her hand and Ethan shook it, noting the firm grip, the calluses on her palms from what? He didn't know what CEOs did that gave them calluses, but it made her seem more human somehow. The car pulled away. Sophie's face pressed to the window, waving even though she couldn't see them waving back. Ethan and Maya stood on the sidewalk watching until the taillights disappeared around a corner. Are you really thinking about it? Maya asked as they walked to where Ethan had parked his Honda several blocks away. The job. I'm really thinking about it. What's stopping you? How could he explain to an 8-year-old the fear that came from stepping outside the safe, small life he'd built? How could he articulate the terror of hoping for something good when life had taught him that good things got taken away? I'm scared, he said simply. Scared of failing. Scared of letting down all the kids who might depend on me. Scared that I'm not good enough for a job like that. Maya stopped walking, forcing Ethan to stop too. She looked up at him with Sarah's eyes, fierce and uncompromising. Daddy, you're the best person I know. You work so hard even when you're sad. You help people even when it costs you things. You taught Sophie to play piano when you didn't have to, just because she needed help and you could give it. Her voice wavered, but didn't break. If you can do all that while being sad, imagine what you could do if you were happy. Imagine how many kids you could help. Ethan knelt down on the sidewalk, heedless of the dirty concrete, and pulled his daughter into a fierce hug. When did you get so wise? I told you before. I've always been wise. You just don't listen. They walked the rest of the way to the car in comfortable silence, Maya's hand in his, the city humming around them with the songs Sophie had heard. Ethan drove them home through streets he'd driven 1,000 times, but everything looked different now, brighter somehow, full of possibility instead of just obligation. That night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan sat at their tiny kitchen table with Clara's business card in front of him. He pulled out his phone and opened a new text message to the number on the card. 3 times he typed something and deleted it. What did you say to a CEO at 10:30 at night? How did you accept a job that felt too good to be real? Finally, he settled on simple honesty. Miss Voss, this is Ethan Cole. I've been thinking about your offer. Can we meet Monday morning to discuss details? I want to make sure I understand what you're asking before I commit. The response came within seconds. Of course, my office, 9 a.m. And Ethan? I have a good feeling about this. Ethan set down his phone and sat in the quiet kitchen, listening to the apartment's familiar sounds, the neighbor's TV through thin walls, the radiator's rhythmic clank, Maya's soft breathing from her bedroom. This had been his life for 3 years. Safe, predictable, small enough that losing it wouldn't destroy him, but maybe it was time to risk something bigger. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Ethan worked his Saturday night shift at Helios, mopping floors and trying not to think about the meeting Monday morning. Tony noticed his distraction but said nothing, which was somehow worse than commentary would have been. Sunday, Ethan took Maya to the library, then the park, trying to exhaust her enough that she wouldn't notice his nerves. But kids noticed everything, and Maya spent the afternoon asking questions about the foundation, about what kinds of kids he'd teach, about whether she could visit sometimes. Of course you can visit, Ethan said, if I take the job, which I haven't decided yet. You're going to take it, Maya said with absolute certainty. I can tell. Yeah? How? You keep touching that bracelet Sophie gave you, like you need to remember why you're doing this. She was right. Ethan's fingers had found the silver bracelet without conscious thought, tracing the engraving. Here with your heart. A reminder that the best things weren't always visible or logical or safe. Sometimes you had to feel your way forward. Monday morning arrived cold and bright. Ethan, dressed in his funeral suit for the 3rd time that month, dropped Maya at school and drove to Helios Group with his stomach in knots. The building looked different in daylight, less intimidating, more like just a place where people worked instead of a monument to wealth and power. Patricia at the reception desk looked surprised to see him out of his maintenance uniform. Mr. Cole, do you have an appointment? With Miss Voss, 9 a.m. Something flickered across Patricia's face. Surprise, curiosity, maybe respect. Of course, 20th floor. She's expecting you. The elevator ride up felt eternal. Ethan watched the numbers climb, thinking about the first time he'd taken this elevator to the music room, when he thought helping Sophie was just a one-time kindness. How could he have known that single decision would lead here, to a job offer that could change everything? Clara's office door was open. She stood at the windows overlooking the city, her posture straight, her dark suit immaculate. When she heard his footsteps, she turned and her face softened into something approaching a smile. Ethan, thank you for coming. Please sit. He settled into one of the visitor chairs, noting the irony that he'd sat in the same chair terrified Morrison was firing him, and now he was here to discuss a job that seemed impossible. I've spent the weekend thinking about your offer, Ethan began, and I have questions. Ask anything. Why me? Really? You could hire someone with a doctorate in music education, someone with experience running programs, someone who looks the part of a foundation director. Why a janitor with a high school diploma and some military band experience? Clara considered this, her fingers steepled on the desk. Because credentials don't teach compassion. Degrees don't teach people to see potential instead of limitations. You have something that can't be taught in any university. You have the ability to make people believe they're capable of more than they imagined. That's what this foundation needs. But I'll be representing Helios Group. Won't people question? Won't they think it's strange that you hired a janitor to run a foundation? Let them think whatever they want. I built this company by trusting my instincts about people, not by worrying about optics. Clara's voice hardened slightly. And if anyone has a problem with my choice of director, they can take it up with me directly. Ethan thought about Morrison, about the contempt in his voice when he'd said people like you. Your facilities director already has a problem with it. With me. He's made that clear. Morrison is no longer an issue. Clara's expression was cold. I had a conversation with him Friday afternoon. He's been reassigned to a different division, one where he'll have no contact with you or with Sophie, and I made it very clear that any retaliation against you would result in immediate termination. You didn't have to... Yes, I did. Morrison represents everything wrong with corporate culture, the belief that worth is measured by title, that kindness is weakness, that people should stay in their designated boxes. Claire's eyes flashed. I won't have that toxicity anywhere near a foundation designed to help children, so yes, I absolutely had to address it. Ethan absorbed this, feeling something like gratitude mixed with concern. Clara had wielded her power to protect him, but power that could protect could also destroy. What happened if he disappointed her? If the foundation failed? Would that same decisive authority be turned against him? As if reading his mind, Clara leaned forward. I know what you're thinking. You're worried this is too good to be real, that there's some catch, that I'll turn on you if you don't deliver perfection, am I right? Something like that. Let me be clear. I'm not offering you this job because I feel sorry for you or because I owe you for helping Sophie. I'm offering it because I genuinely believe you're the right person for it, but I'm also realistic. Building a foundation from scratch is hard work. There will be challenges, setbacks, moments where you question whether you're qualified. I don't expect perfection. I expect effort, honesty, and the same care you showed Sophie. Can you give me that? Yes, Ethan said, the word coming out before he could overthink it. Yes, I can do that. Claire's face broke into a genuine smile. Then welcome aboard, Director Cole. Director Cole. The title felt foreign, like clothing that didn't fit right, but maybe he'd grow into it. They spent the next hour discussing logistics. The foundation would be housed initially in unused office space on Helios's 15th floor while they secured a dedicated building. Ethan would have a budget for hiring instructors, purchasing instruments, and developing curriculum. They'd start with a pilot program in January, targeting 20 students, with plans to expand based on results. I want Sophie in the first cohort, Clara said, not for special treatment, but because she deserves to be part of something she helped inspire. Is that acceptable? More than acceptable. She'll be an excellent mentor for the other students. Good. Clara pulled out a folder thick with documents. These are the employment contracts, benefits information, and foundational charter. Take them home, read them carefully. If you have questions, call me. If everything looks good, sign and return them by Friday. You'll start January 2nd. Ethan took the folder with shaking hands. This was real. This was actually happening. He was going to run a foundation, teach music to kids who needed it, do work that mattered instead of just surviving. Ms. Voss, Clara, I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by making this foundation everything it can be. Thank me by helping kids the way you helped Sophie. She stood, extending her hand. And Ethan? Welcome to the team. I have a feeling we're going to do something extraordinary together. The handshake felt like a pact, a promise, a beginning. Ethan left her office feeling like he was floating, the folder clutched to his chest like treasure. He made it to the elevator before the reality hit him, and he had to sit down on a bench in the corridor, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he'd just agreed to. He was going to be director of the Helios Foundation for Music and Inclusion. He was going to change his life, Maya's life, the lives of children he hadn't even met yet. It was terrifying. It was incredible. It was everything he'd stopped letting himself hope for. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya, sent from Mrs. Patterson's phone. Did you take the job? Ethan smiled through tears and typed back, I took the job. The response was immediate. Yes! I'm so proud of you, Daddy. Followed by approximately 15 dinosaur emojis, which was Maya's way of expressing extreme emotion. Ethan laughed, the sound echoing in the empty corridor, feeling lighter than he had in 3 years. He pulled out his phone and did something he hadn't done since Sarah died. He called his mother in Florida, the woman who taught him piano as a child, and who he'd been avoiding because her voice reminded him too much of everything he'd lost. Ethan? His mother's voice was cautious, surprised. Is everything okay? Is Maya... Everyone's fine, Mom. Better than fine. I wanted to tell you something. Something good. He told her about Sophie, about the piano lessons, about the foundation. His mother cried, her pride and relief coming through the phone in waves. They talked for 20 minutes, the longest conversation they'd had since the funeral. And when they hung up, Ethan felt like maybe he'd repaired something that had been broken. The rest of December passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Ethan worked his final shifts at Helios as a janitor, training his replacement, saying goodbye to the job that had kept him and Maya afloat, but had slowly been suffocating him with its sameness. Tony shook his hand on the last night, gruff but genuine. Heard about your new gig. Director, huh? Fancy. Still the same guy underneath. Nah. Tony smiled slightly. You're different now, less defeated. Good for you, Cole. Some people deserve good things. Turns out you're one of them. On Christmas Eve, there was a knock on Ethan's apartment door. He opened it to find a massive box on his doorstep, wrapped in silver paper with a card attached. Inside was a full-size digital piano, the kind with weighted keys and real piano sounds, along with a note in elegant handwriting. Every teacher needs an instrument. Merry Christmas to you and Maya. With gratitude, Clara and Sophie. Maya burst into tears when she saw it, running her fingers over the keys with reverence. Can I learn? Can you teach me like you teach Sophie? Of course, Dinosaur. We'll start after the new year. They spent Christmas morning at the piano, Ethan teaching Maya simple melodies while carols played on the radio. It was the first Christmas since Sarah's death that felt like something other than endurance. The first time Ethan played without feeling like he was betraying her memory. New Year's came and went quietly, and then it was January 2nd, his first day as director of the Helios Foundation for Music and Inclusion. The office Clara had assigned him was modest but functional. Windows overlooking the city, a desk that had clearly been someone's cast-off, filing cabinets waiting to be filled with student records and curriculum plans. The space next door was larger, already being converted into a music room with donated pianos, adaptive instruments, and acoustic paneling. Ethan stood in the doorway of what would become the teaching space, imagining it filled with students of all abilities, all backgrounds, all finding their voices through music. The weight of responsibility was staggering, but underneath the fear was something else. Excitement, purpose, the sense that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. His phone rang, Clara's number. First day nerves? She asked without preamble. Terrified. Good. Terror means you care. Ethan, I wanted to tell you something before you get caught up in the work. Sophie wants to perform at the Foundation's opening event. She's written something, an original composition. She wants to dedicate it to you. Ethan's throat closed. She doesn't have to, she wants to. And I think it would be beautiful. An original piece by one of our students showing the world what's possible when we believe in potential over limitations. When's the opening? March 15th. 3 months to get everything ready. Think you can do it? I have to, don't I? Clara laughed. Yes, you do. But Ethan, I believe in you. The same way you believed in Sophie. Trust that belief. They hung up and Ethan got to work. The next 3 months were a blur of hiring instructors, interviewing students, developing curriculum, securing donations of instruments and equipment. He worked 16-hour days, pouring everything he had into building something that would last beyond him. The first cohort of students arrived in late January, 20 kids aged 6 to 16, representing every kind of disability and background. There were blind students like Sophie, deaf students learning through vibration and visual rhythm, students with cerebral palsy using adaptive keyboards, students with autism finding expression through structured improvisation. Ethan taught them the way he'd taught Sophie, with high expectations wrapped in kindness, with belief that disability was just a different way of experiencing the world, with the conviction that everyone had music inside them waiting to be discovered. And slowly, miraculously, the foundation took shape. Students who'd been told they'd never be able to play music discovered they absolutely could. Parents who'd mourned their children's limitations watched them exceed every expectation. Teachers who'd been burned out by traditional education found new purpose in adaptive instruction. By mid-March, the Helios Foundation for Music and Inclusion was real, not just an idea or a hope, but an actual program changing actual lives. The opening event was scheduled for March 15th, a Saturday evening. The audience would include Helios board members, potential donors, education officials, and the families of all 20 students. It was simultaneously a celebration and a fundraising opportunity, Clara's way of ensuring the foundation would have support beyond just Helios money. The week before, Sophie approached Ethan with her composition, a piece she'd titled "The Things We Cannot See." "It's about learning to find beauty in unexpected places," she explained, her hands resting on the piano keys. "It's about you, Uncle Ethan, about how you found your music again by teaching me, about how we both lost things but found each other." Ethan listened to her play through the piece, complex, emotional, technically demanding. It was extraordinary, the kind of composition that would silence doubters and prove that blind musicians could create works of depth and originality. "Sophie, this is beautiful. I'm honored you're dedicating it to me." "You saved me," she said simply. "When I thought being blind meant I couldn't do important things, you showed me different. This is how I say thank you." The night of the opening arrived with spring-like warmth, the city shaking off winter with the promise of renewal. The Helios Building's auditorium, the same space where Sophie had played her recital, was packed with over 200 people. Ethan stood backstage in a new suit Clara had insisted the foundation budget for, his heart hammering, watching families settle into seats. Clara found him 5 minutes before the program started. She wore a midnight blue dress, her hair loose, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "Ready?" she asked. Terrified. "Good answer." She smiled. "Ethan, before we start, I wanted to tell you something. This foundation, what you've built in 3 months, it's exceeded every expectation I had. You've changed 20 lives already. Imagine what you'll do with 20 years. I couldn't have done it without you taking a chance on me. We took a chance on each other." Clara touched his arm briefly. "Now go out there and show them what's possible." The program opened with a welcome from Clara, who spoke eloquently about the foundation's mission and Ethan's vision. Then Ethan himself took the stage, his prepared remarks forgotten as he looked out at the audience, at parents holding hands, at students in the front row bouncing with nervous energy, at Maya sitting beside Mrs. Patterson, beaming with pride. "3 months ago," he began, his voice steadier than expected, "I was a janitor who'd forgotten why music mattered. I'd lost my wife, lost my will to play, lost the part of myself that believed in beauty and purpose. Then I met a 9-year-old blind girl who was learning to play piano at midnight in an empty corporate building, and everything changed. Sophie reminded me that music isn't about sight or ability or perfection. It's about heart. It's about the courage to share who you are with the world, even when you're scared. Tonight, you're going to hear from 20 students who've shown that same courage. They're going to show you that disability doesn't limit artistry. It just changes how we access it. Listen with your hearts, not your eyes. That's what music asks of us. That's what these kids deserve." He stepped aside as the first student took the stage, a 6-year-old with Down syndrome who'd learned to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on xylophone. The performance was simple, enthusiastic, imperfect, and absolutely beautiful. The audience erupted in applause. Student after student performed. Deaf children playing drums with such rhythmic precision that the hearing audience could barely believe they couldn't hear the beats. Children with cerebral palsy coaxing melodies from adaptive keyboards. Blind students playing by touch and memory with extraordinary skill. And finally, Sophie. She walked on stage alone, her hand trailing the edge of the stage curtain for orientation, and settled at the grand piano with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times instead of twice. "This piece is called The Things We Cannot See," she announced to the audience. "I wrote it for my teacher, Uncle Ethan, who taught me that the most important things in life aren't the ones we see with our eyes. They're the ones we feel with our hearts." Then she began to play. The composition started quietly, almost hesitantly, like someone learning to trust their own voice. Then it built. Complex harmonies layering over each other, rhythms shifting and resolving, melody lines interweaving like conversations between old friends. The piece told a story without words, loss transforming into hope, isolation giving way to connection, fear becoming courage. Ethan stood in the wings, tears streaming down his face, Watching this child he'd helped teach create something that transcended her blindness, his grief, all the limitations the world tried to impose. This was why music mattered. This was why he'd been right to take the risk, to step outside the safe life he'd built from the ruins of his marriage. When Sophie finished, the final notes hanging in the air like a prayer, the audience sat in stunned silence for 3 full seconds. Then they rose as one, applause thundering through the auditorium. Sophie stood and curtsied, her face radiant, and Ethan watched Clara stand in the front row, crying openly. No longer the controlled CEO, but just a mother watching her daughter shine. The reception afterward was a chaos of congratulations and donations, wealthy patrons writing checks, education officials discussing partnerships, parents thanking Ethan through tears for giving their children opportunities they'd thought impossible. But the moment that mattered most came later, after most guests had left, when Sophie and Maya found Ethan in the empty auditorium. "Uncle Ethan?" Sophie's voice was soft. "Did I do okay?" "You were perfect. More than perfect. You showed everyone what's possible when we stopped letting limitations define us." "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. I just helped you find what was already inside you." Maya tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy? Are you happy now? For real happy? Not just pretending?" Ethan knelt down so he could look at both girls, his daughter and the student who'd become like a second daughter. "I'm happy," he said, and meant it completely. "For the first time in 3 years, I'm actually happy." Sophie reached into her pocket and pulled out something small and silver, the bracelet she'd given him months ago, the one he wore every day. "You gave this back to me tonight," she said, confusion on her face. "No, sweetheart, I'm still wearing—" Ethan looked at his wrist and found it bare. The clasp must have broken during the event. Sophie pressed the bracelet into his hand. "Mrs. Chen found it backstage. But Uncle Ethan, I don't think you need it anymore. You already know how to hear with your heart. You've known it all along." She was right. The bracelet had been a reminder, but he didn't need reminders anymore. He'd stepped out of the gray life of survival and into the colored world of purpose. He'd found his music again, found himself again, found a future that Sarah would have been proud of. "Keep it," he told Sophie, "as a reminder that you taught me as much as I taught you." Sophie closed his fingers around the bracelet. "Then we share it. You wear it when you need courage. I'll wear it when I need to remember I'm capable. Deal?" "Deal." Clara appeared then, her driver waiting to take Sophie home. But before they left, she turned to Ethan one final time. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything, for seeing Sophie, for taking a chance on this crazy idea, for being exactly who I hoped you'd be. Thank you for giving me the chance to be that person." They shook hands, but Clara pulled him into a brief hug instead, surprising them both. "See you Monday, Director Cole." "See you Monday." As Clara and Sophie left, Ethan stood in the empty auditorium with Maya, looking at the stage where 20 students had shown the world that ability came in many forms, that music transcended every limitation, that hope was stronger than grief. "Daddy?" Maya's voice was small. "Do you think Mom would be proud?" Ethan thought about Sarah, vibrant, musical, generous Sarah, who'd believed he could do anything, who'd pushed him to pursue music even when it seemed impractical, who'd seen his potential when he couldn't see it himself. "Yeah, Dinosaur, I think she'd be very proud." "Me too." Maya slipped her hand into his. "Can we go home now? I'm tired." They left Helios Group together, father and daughter, walking out into the spring evening. The city spread before them, lit with possibilities, humming with the songs Sophie had taught Ethan to hear. This was his life now. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and purposeful, and filled with a joy he'd thought he'd lost forever. Behind them, the Helios building stood against the night sky, its windows glowing with light. Somewhere inside, on the 20th floor, a piano sat waiting for the next student who needed to learn that disability wasn't destiny, that loss didn't have to be permanent, that the most important things in life were the ones we felt instead of saw. Ethan Cole, widower, father, teacher, director of a foundation that would go on to change thousands of lives, drove home through the city streets, his daughter asleep in the back seat, Sarah's memory no longer a source of pain, but of inspiration, and the future stretching ahead bright with promise. He'd learned something important in these past months. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness created the biggest changes. Sometimes the most important moments happened when no one was watching, when you simply did what was right because someone needed you. And sometimes when you thought your story was over, the universe gave you a second chapter more beautiful than anything you could have imagined. The lights of the city blurred past his windows. Music played softly on the radio. And Ethan Cole, who'd once been just a man surviving each day, finally understood what it meant to truly live.